This is the September 13th board meeting of Department of Consumer Affairs, the Podiatric Medical Board of California. And I'd like to welcome everyone this morning. And we're going to get going here with call to order and establishment of quorum.
Judith Manzi.
Present.
Caroline Trulio-Elliott.
Present.
Maria Cadenas.
Present.
Neil Mansdorf.
Present.
Caroline McElwain.
Present.
Michael Zapp.
Present.
Okay, I'd like to call at this time, I'd like to welcome everyone here this morning and call for public comments on items not on the agenda. The board may not discuss or take action on any matters raised during this public comment section except to decide whether to place this matter on the agenda for further meetings. So do we have any public comments? Okay. So with that being established, let's go on and review and approve the June 7th, 2019 board meeting minutes.
Mansdorf, motion to approve.
Michael Zapp, second.
So we have a motion to approve the minutes of June 17th. All in favor?
Manzi. Dr. Manzi.
Aye.
Elliott.
Aye.
Cadenas.
Aye.
Dr. Mansdorf.
Aye.
Dr. McElwain.
Aye.
Dr. Zapp.
Aye.
Very good. All right. So now we'd like to receive an update from the Department of Consumer Affairs Budget Office on the budget, fund condition, and possible budget impacts for the increase of the Eternal General rates. Mr. Carl Berryman, Associate Budget Analysis. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Carl Bierman with the DCA Budget Office. I am here to provide you a brief budget update along with going over the board's current fund condition. I just wanted to start off with a few items that happened since the last time I was here. The first thing is that 2018-19 is done. We're currently in 1920. Consumer Affairs accounting staff is diligently working on coming up with fiscal month 12 data for 18-19. We currently have data for the first 11 months of 18-19. 9 of those months, the data has already been validated with the State Controller's Office, which means it's ready to close. And we are hopeful that we'll get prelim 12 here shortly. So I'll be able to advise you on what your actual expenditures were for a prior year. Another big thing that's happened since the last time I was here was the Attorney General increase. Some of you may know that on June 30th, lots of all the DCA boards and bureaus received a letter stating that the Attorney General was going to increase their fees. DCA did a study, and the average of the increase in fees was around 30% across the board, which is significant. So what we did is we did a drill to take every board and bureau's 3-year average of what they spent for their Attorney General and then apply a 30% increase to that. Specifically for the Board of Podiatric Medicine, that equates to an increase of about $75,000 per year. Now, luckily, because it was so abrupt, the Attorney General's office is only starting to implement the fee this month in September, so it did not start July 1 as we were originally thinking, which will result in the net savings of a little bit. So current year, that'll only hit the board for about $57,000 instead of the $75,000. That will be ongoing. Any questions thus far? No? Okay. Let's move on to the fund condition. In your board packets, you should have something that looks like this. I will cover what's going on here. So if you look at the fund condition under 18-19, the prior year expenditures, so the bottom box, you'll see a number there, 1321. That'll look a little bit higher than the year prior for 17-18, and that's because that's the board's full appropriation. We're currently estimating that the board will spend its full appropriation, even though I know it'll be slightly less than that because we don't have fiscal month 12 data yet. So if anyone's wondering about that, that's why it looks a little bit high. Current year, you can see the board has appropriated a little under $1.5 million gross. Factor in what the board saves every year, which is around $200,000 to $300,000. It results in a net appropriation of a little under, $1.2 million. And so I would expect for last year that the board would save about an additional $100,000 on top of their of their appropriation, due to we're projecting that the DOI line item is fully expended, which is very unlikely to happen. So once I get the FM12 data for last year, I will provide Brian an updated expenditure sheet for you guys with your actual numbers. And if you look outward on the fund condition, so budget year +1, and you compare that to the revenues that are being brought in by the board in the top box, you can see that the board is spending more than it's bringing in revenues, which I pointed out last time. In the budget office, we call that structurally imbalanced, if you ever hear that term. And last time I also recommended that the board conduct a fee study to see what the fees would need to be set at so that the fund would be stable for the long term. Luckily for us today, that has happened, and the gentleman presenting after me will cover that fee analysis for you guys.
So this fund condition is assuming that there is no increase in revenues because of the proposed.
Not yet. This fund condition is as of the Budget Act, so what is currently in place this fiscal year.
Okay.
Any fee increases would take effect later.
Right, so it'd make it look better.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm.
But the AG increase is included in this, right?
Not on this document. The one that Jeff will cover later, I gave him those numbers. He came up with similar calculations himself, and that'll be included on the fund condition that he'll present to make recommendations for fees.
Okay.
Any other questions?
The increase in the $75,000 increase
Yeah.
now that's really $57,000 increase. Is that somehow factored in all this? Or not?
It is on the updated,
updated
condition.
So this is without that updated fund condition.
Yes.
So if this is without the updated fund condition, and then the 2021 and 21-22 is the expected, because that's something you're expecting.
Right. It's the
an
future.
unknown, kind of. None of that's reflected with either the increase in both those things, both the
Right.
the
So
increase
as of
in
the
the
as
money
the
going
Budget
out
Act,
and the increase in the money coming in.
Right. So the updated fund condition will show an increase in revenues based off of
The increased fee structure.
increased fees as well as the increased expenditure of
Okay.
the AG.
Thank you.
And then for the budget years going forward, are you using full appropriation for 1920, 2021, and 2022 in terms of the Department of Consumer the Division State of Operations? So under expenditures, we have 1.3 million, right, for last year?
Yes.
And then 1.4, is that the full amount, assuming
Yes,
that
that's
we
the
take
full
the full
amount.
appropriation? Okay.
Yeah, so the way it's displayed is just a little bit different. So in prior years, because we're trying to reflect actuals as much as possible, that 1.3 already included an estimated savings of $200,000. So technically last year, the board's appropriation was around 1.5, which is very similar to what's showing this year. This year, we just factored in an estimated savings of $300,000 and ongoing because we believe that's what was achievable.
There is a huge difference between the reserve for economic uncertainties and your fund balance between 19 and 20 year and 2021, like from 259 to 13. I don't get that.
You're
Down at the
talking-
very bottom it says reserve for economic uncertainties, fund balance.
Yes.
And then, yeah, so at the very And that means because that's all that's left after you extrapolate all this other stuff?
Yes.
Got
Yes.
it.
So the way that's calculated is it takes, at the end of the fiscal year, it takes whatever cash is left in your fund, and then there's a formula to calculate what it anticipates next year's expenses will be, and divides that by 12 to get a per month calculation of how many months you could essentially pay for without any additional revenues coming in.
Okay. Okay. Let's not be too sunny.
Yeah.
Anybody have any other questions? Okay, great.
No.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, we're going to receive an update on our fee study by Mr. Jeff Michaels. No? Yes? Yes.
Morning.
I hope you have better news.
No, it's actually worse.
Oh, God.
And I'm afraid I'm going to confuse you probably.
Go for it.
You're gonna see a packet in front of you that is the final component of what will be about a 35-page report. That analyzes staff workload, revenues, expenses, and fund condition over 4 years, and it develops recommendations for additional fee increases. And I'm going to walk you through that, and it's kind of painful. And I apologize to you for not having this to you earlier. The staff and I have done a great job of catching my mistakes and getting formulas fixed up. Otherwise, we would have tried to have had this to you a week ago. But since then, we've had several other discussions that have changed it somewhat. And so I'm glad we had the discussions, and you're basically getting an interim report. But I hate to say it's not going to get any better. As Carl is indicating, there are a few things that we probably need to walk through first so that you understand the concepts. And the packet you were given hopefully is not stapled. Is it? Okay. I'm going to show you some of these pages, and I'm going to have you go to them because they're kind of the backup. You can imagine this is an Excel workbook, and the pages are linked, and things roll up, and I'm sure you're all familiar with that product and what it can do, but I want to make sure you understand some of the basic stuff. As far as the report itself, it's something that's probably very common to you. It'll have an executive summary, an introduction, a background. The background, we'll talk about the future of podiatric medicine, which from everything I can see is very bright. Nationwide, it cites employment data, talks about the schools, the 9 schools nationwide. And then we talk about board composition, the committees, and so forth. And then from there, we get into the study results, and we talk about licensee characteristics, and then we start analyzing revenue, expenses, and fund condition. Well, right now, there's a big hole. We've got the information for revenue, which recently came in. It's not finalized, but it's good information, and I'll be happy to share that with you. The problem is we need more, and I want to show you why you're going to need more. First of all, you know that licensing pays for everything, right? We're not billing people for enforcement efforts and so forth. The licensing has to pick it all up. If you'll look at, there's 3 pages in the back. One that deals with licenses, one that says PMBC fees, and the third one should say revenue at the top, but it doesn't. But it gives you a long list of all the revenue sources. Okay, so if we start with the first one, does everybody find those okay? The only reason I'm bringing it up is I want to show you what feeds into what, and hopefully that'll answer some of your questions as we go forward. This first one dealing with active licenses. If you look down at that second group where it says permanent DPM initial licenses.
Give us 1 sec here, Jeff.
Sure.
We're still
Yeah.
trying to catch up.
Everybody find it? This one right here? Okay. This is all data that comes from both DCA and from Andrea, your licensing coordinator. It's the latest information that we have for the last fiscal year. And while you see the information on resident licenses down below that, it's a very small part of your fees as far as representative of the total. If you look at the average, the 4-year average of permanent DPM initial licenses where it says issued and you go across to average, it says 88. So we're averaging about 88 initial new licenses a year. And they've gone anywhere from 71 to 104. So they're on an increase. The trend is increasing, and that's good. And that more than covers your number of retirees that are basically asking for fee exemptions at this point. So you're covered there. If you look at renewed, down below the 88 is 1,048. That's what your average has been on renewals over those 4 fiscal years. So the average is reasonably high. And the reason why I mentioned that is if you look at this next one where it says PMBC fees and statute limits, this shows what your current fee structure is right now, what your statutory limits are right now. And you'll see if you look down on those calculations below, you'll see where it says average number per year under initial application license includes 88. So I multiplied 88 times the 949, which is what it would cost an initial licensee. So that raises about $83,000. Not a lot of money. But if you go to the column below, the row below it, where it talks about renewal license includes, you'll see that 1,048 got sucked off this page and multiplies times the 1,100. So you can imagine the full up amount that you'll get off this new $200 increase over the course of a full fiscal year, and you know you only got half the year this year, is $1.1 million. So that's about a 33% increase over what you've typically gotten, which is about $850, $860, something like that. A very good move, and it was a saving grace as far as being able to carry you not only from this year, but into the next year, depending on what you're going to do. And we will get down to that fund condition statement that Carl showed you, and I've got some adjustments that I'm going to show you that includes some of the things that he had referenced. So basically, so you understand how this information got to here, how the calculations, because that's going to end up in these spreadsheets later on. This last one on revenue basically shows you from top to bottom where all your revenue comes from. And you'll see that the first row at the top is biennial renewal. It's 81.8%, 81.1% of that total revenue at the bottom of the page. The initial license revenue represents 7.1%, plus you got fingerprints and you got an application fee, so roughly 8%. So I use these calculations as I go through this. I didn't really bother much with residents. Granted, $100,000 is not chicken feed, but in terms of your overall budget, it's kind of budget dust. You know, it's something that you're going to have to make up for someplace else. So we got those three, and that deals with the revenue side of the house. If you look at this item, which is basically the budget report, this page in the back, it shows expenses. And as Carl was indicating, we don't have the 18-19 information yet. We do have preliminary 17-18. I'm going with that, but we were told that will be coming soon as well. And then what I'm expecting, probably in October, early October, if the gods are with us, we will get preliminary 18-19. But right now I've just got Budget Act information in there. So it's either going to be high, low, I don't know. But in order to give you some sort of calculation, I had to have the full complement of expenses. And if you look at the top two items, where it says personnel services, 40%, operating expenses and equipment, 7.1%, that tells you that this board is only able to control 47% of its expenses. 53% goes to overhead, which are departmental services and interagency services, which are all billed. If you were in a private business, you'd get billed every month for this and you'd know where you're at. The state doesn't work that way. You get billed when you get billed, and a lot of times it's at the end of the year. So areas that you'll see in here, like under interagency services, where all I've got is budgeted numbers, those could theoretically be much larger than what they are now. And under enforcement, under Attorney General, my 3-year average, my 4-year average, you'll see out in the very far right-hand column, it says average 196,000, so roughly 197,000. If you multiply that by 1.3, which is what Carl was indicating, a 30% increase, that means we're going to average roughly $256,000. Well, if you take that minus what we've got now, you can see his $57,000 to $60,000 is very reasonable, because they didn't start actually taking this money until September. But the reality is that's a big chunk, but it's not enough to drive this whole thing crazy. What the problem is that we don't know what these other expenses are right now. And what I typically do is by this time of the year have all the actual expenses. I can do trend analysis for you. You can see where it's going to go. But frankly, everything in departmental services and enforcement is a crapshoot. You have no control over that. And that's because you only have 5 people. And so you have to spread all these expenses over 5 people, not a larger board or bureau where I've been before, where I've had as many as 100, 150 people. Well, the personnel services and OE&E is a significant portion. It's usually 82%. And so that means there's 18% to play with. Here, you got more than double that. So you got a lot that's beyond your control. And that's where I'm afraid the hurt is going to come when we get into some of the other information. If you were to try to spread your costs right now, if you take that 1.32 million that he referenced earlier, divide it by the staff hours. So that's 10,400 hours. Your average cost is $127 an hour. So if you're going to do a service that's not scheduled and you need to charge somebody for whatever, the staff needs to bill at $127 an hour. Well, if you didn't have all that big overhead, you'd bill at $60 an hour. But let's face it, you need a lot of this overhead because especially your investigative services, you don't perform. Somebody else does that, the medical board and so forth. So just recognize that you're a small entity. What's really critical is that you were able to, Brian had the foresight to get in this 2-year improvement for $200. But the reality is that you see what happened at the bottom line there when you looked at that reserve months. By the time you get to, in fact, let me go into, take this one right here where it says Budget Base Act. And this is one that's got, basically it's Carl's information, but I changed a couple of things. You were asking about where the Attorney General's rate increase is. If you look down below under disbursements, under that line 111, you see Attorney General rate increase, $57,075 across. He was kind enough to let me lower the savings from $300,000 to $200,000, which is more realistic, because right now you're fully staffed. So it's going to be tough to get, you're not going to get any salary savings, and which is what you really have control over. So we were able to factor that down. But if you look at the very bottom line on this thing, in year 2021, which is another year out, we're at minus 2.5 months. This year, at the end of 2019-20, you'll be down to 1.6 months reserve. And I can tell you that other boards I've worked with have all had a minimum policy of 1 year of reserve. You may elect to have more in this. But when you do, in fact, this may be fortuitous because you might give me direction to say, go back and run some more numbers in another way, and I can do that. Happy to do that. But so for the most part, what I did is I left, if you go up above, up into revenues, I left everything the same. I didn't include any additional increases over time. And then down below under expenditures, I just reduced estimated savings from $300,000 a year to $200,000, and I threw in the attorney rate general fee. And so my bottom line is going to look a little different than what Carl's did on his fund condition. Does that make sense to you? Is that not? Hopefully, it's not too confusing. Because unfortunately, what I've had to do is, because we don't have the final numbers, I normally run my own expense information, trend everything, tell you where it's going to go, what the odds are. This rolled it all up into that line 111. It's not disaggregated, so I can't tell you what's really rolled up in it. I know theoretically what's rolled up in it, but I don't really know what the expenses are at this point. When we get that, I can break this out a lot better for you. But I'm afraid the answer isn't going to be a whole lot better. In fact, I expect it'll go the other way. Okay, so that takes care of that base case. If we go into scenario 1, which is the next sheet, I did make a few differences, and I want to point them out to you. Everybody got that?
Quick question. Do we have a way to present this? I know we have audience members and other people. Have they sheets of paper?
Yeah, theoretically, I could have done this with a laptop
Okay.
and pointing it up to something. Yeah, I wasn't sure what we had available at that point, and I thought, well, probably, when we get to the final, I'll be happy to do that for you. Okay, so everybody's got this one. If you go up to the rows under revenues and you go to renewal fees, you're going to see a line that says 734,000, which is less than 1718. And before, Carl had 190. Well, I went actually to the most current revenue. It's 918,000. So I took the 190 out and I put 184,000 in there. And instead of putting 734 and 184 again, I just rolled it up into the next full year. So now you're showing the 1.152, which is the same number we calculated earlier on those other sheets. And then to instead of messing up Carl's spreadsheet the rest of the way over from 2021 through 2023, I just simply took the difference between 1.1 million and 866, you get 286,000. Bottom line is it's 1.15 all the way across the top. So I've now adjusted the revenues based on the fact that if you were to make this $200 temporary fee permanent, that's the effect that it would have at this point. We haven't added anything else. We've just said, and I think Brian wanted to indicate this in the sunset report, that we need to make that permanent. Well, if we make that permanent, you look down to the bottom line again, everything else stays the same. You look down to the bottom line in months in reserve, you're going to see that in 1920 we've picked up a little time. We've gotten out to 2021 and we still have a half a month left. That's it. By the time we get into 21, 22, we're going south and it's only going to get worse. Now, you see that division formula there. The reason why it's there is that it draws the division number from the next column over. Since I don't have that information, I can't plug anything in at this point, but I can tell you it gets worse. Okay? That's the only thing I can tell you. How much worse, I'm not sure. Most likely, it would probably be down to probably -3. But anyway, so that's if we just get the $200 temporary turned into permanent. That's your scenario 1. That would be my recommendation at a minimum, is that get converted to buy yourself some more time.
Quick question. On scenario 1, everything else stays the same, but expenditures are increasing by cost of living, or what?
Yeah, what Carl's factor does is they are increasing, I think it was 1%? 3%?
Include employee compensation
Okay.
and benefits.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's picked up in that line that's that says 1111 down below. That rolls in everything that their assumptions going forward.
And then the 57,000, 75, those are...
That's the Attorney General rate increase that he was talking about. That wasn't in his base case, but he was kind enough to provide it to me so I could build it into this one. I originally thought it was built into that top line. He said, no, it's not built into the top line. It's a separate line. So I built it in here.
Yeah, so,
That's why we're a little different than what Carl's was.
right, but it assumes that the Attorney General is not going to go up anymore, right? I mean, that's what scenario one is assuming.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm basically, what I'm trying to do is underestimate revenues and overestimate expenses, but I didn't want to take it too far at this point. I'd rather see some real data first, and at that point we can run some trends, and if you decide you want it changed, I'll change it. Okay, so that's scenario one, and again, we're really only talking about a very minor amount, and it really doesn't affect your reserve very much at all. It buys you a little bit of time. Scenario two, this is where things start to get a little interesting. What you're going to see up above, up in revenues, again, the 734, 184, the 1152, et cetera, that line's all there. Down below that, you're going to see additional fees required. And what I'm saying is, on this scenario, is ultimately you need $500,000 a year to get you to 6 month, any kind of 6 month reserve. And because you only get 250 the first year, because what we're looking for you to do would be to authorize a change as of January 1, 2020, you're only going to get a half a year's worth. So that's why it says only 250 in 2021 and then goes 500 beyond that. Everything else down below stays the same, but you see now from 1920 it goes from 2.3, then it creeps its way up, 2.5 in 2021, 21, 22, 4.2. By the time you get out to 22, 23, you're going to be at 6 months or better. So that at a minimum is what you have to do. Now, the question is how do you pay for it? And who's going to pay for it and how much? And you're going to see a little box up to the right where it says licensing calculations. And what I've done is I've calculated the year total that's needed, and you can see we've jumped now from 1.1 million to 1.6 million. And if you divide that by going further to the right, if you divide that by the 1,088 that we mentioned earlier, that's roughly how much it is per participant, $1,577. Your current is $1,100, so the differential is $477. That assumes that your renewal people only are carrying the overhead. If you split it up so that it's on a pro rata basis, you go to the two lines below, it says renewal, their share really is not 1.6, it's 1.4. Their cost would be 1,376. So in other words, they're going to have to come out an extra $276. But look what it does to the initial licensees. It basically doubles them. And now you're going to go from a cost increase of $949 plus almost another $900. So this is more a political industry type issue that you have to figure out. And my understanding in the past is that the renewal people are the ones that always absorb this, and that's something that you have to consider. It's going to get worse in scenario 3. Okay, does these calculations make sense?
Okay, so what you're proposing is if we did this one, we make the renewals not 200 jump, but a 276 jump.
But 200 plus.
276. So you're going to charge you're going to actually increase them by $476,
Yeah.
and then the newer people are going to be increased by another $900.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So basically double.
That's what it would take.
Yeah, they're paying $949 right now, so that's going to double.
Mm-hmm.
So that, again, that's something that only you can tell by putting feelers out in the industry which way you want to go. I know for me, and I just coming out of college, and I said, geez, I'm paying more than a person who's making a lot of money. There's an issue there. But it's a question of fairness. You know, how do you want to split it? And you can split it any way you want. I'm just giving it to you what the pro rata share is. Okay? So going to scenario 3, everything else is the same, except now I've bumped it up, and I'm going to $800,000. So $400,000 is picked up in the first half of 2021, and then it goes 800 on over, and you'll see what the impact is on the calculations to the right side. Again, if you're going to make all renewals bear the burden of almost $2 million, you're gonna bump them up $764. Everybody. That's the renewals. That's the renewal. The renewals would be picking up the weight for the entire organization. If you do it on a pro rata basis, you can see they're going to pick up. It actually drops for them. It's only an extra $526, but it's $950 for your new people. And again, that's something you have to consider. Then look at the bottom line down below, months in reserve. You see it's jumping very quickly from 2.3 to 3.7 to 7.6. That'll probably be around 11 months. Unfortunately, I can't fill in that other number. But so what I'm saying is you're going to get a fund reserve of 12 months within 3 to 4 years. You don't get it right away, but you'll get it in time. And then, of course, you're going to have increasing expenses which haven't been factored in, which might keep it fairly level. And that's all we can really only tell until I get a little bit better expense information. And even then, my concern is that it's going to get worse, not better, only because there are a lot of hidden charges in here that don't really get billed to the last quarter. And, then you're stuck, and you've got to spread that amongst basically 5 people and everybody else. So there are economies of scale if you were a larger group, but there aren't, as far as this board is concerned. Does this make sense?
Yes, it totally makes sense, but I have a question for you. Do you do this for other boards?
Yeah.
Okay, and do the, like a small board like us? Or not?
This is the smallest one I've ever done it for.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
And then like with these other boards, with these proposed increases, or how you would make yourself legitimately, solvable or
Yeah.
solvable. Are the increases this dramatic?
No.
Okay.
And the reason they aren't is because the last one I did it for was Bureau of Surveillance and Investigative Services, whatever. I mean, they've got a large group.
Okay.
So when you start looking at their personnel costs and their OE&E as a percentage of overall cost, it's 75-80%. So they can take some hits, in the interagency stuff because they can spread it out amongst 100 and some employees. You can't do that here. And yet you also can't operate without these other services. I mean, you'd have to staff up yourself to do those things. So part of it is just the fact is the lack of transparency. If you were, I assume all of you have owned your own businesses. You get a monthly P&L. You know where you stand. These people don't. Sometimes they go literally almost a whole year before they get real good information. Fortunately, Carl's been really responsive. He's gotten them everything he can as quick as he can. But it's not like a Fortune 500 company or even a small business where you rely on your accounting information. And so you're basically at a standpoint where if you want to keep this organization alive, you really need to come back with a policy that says at a minimum it's probably got to be at least a year, which is what I'm trying to get at with this third scenario. It's been contemplated up to 2 years. Well, up to 2 years, you're probably talking 1.6 in addition, so you're doubling everything again. That's pretty scary. I'd rather see you take a lower level and see where it actually goes over time than to do one that's going to be so high that it's going to totally freak out your membership.
So let's just review this really quick.
Sure.
Okay, scenario 1 goes, who gets charged what? We do scenario. Let's get
Scenario 1 is basically
the new guy, the
Oops,
new
yeah.
new licensees would be increased.
Yeah, it's basically what you're doing is you're making the temporary fee increase permanent. So it's just like it is now in renewals.
Everybody's just getting increased 200.
Yeah, well, the renewals are. Yeah,
The renew-
As it is current right now.
it's current now.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that's just, and then that puts us into a bad position. Okay. Scenario 2,
Scenario 2,
the new
It-
guys are going to get charged how much extra?
well, again, it's your call. If you say, I want my renewal people to bear the load, they're going to get charged $764 more. Your initials won't get charged anything. If you do it on a pro rata basis, then renewals get charged $526 more, and initials get charged $950 more. So basically doubling their cost.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is there another option between those two, meaning not giving any to new and giving pro rata to new? Is there some middle
There could
ground?
be. I haven't had any direction to run different scenarios. I'm happy to do that.
But those are options that we have available to us.
I think that's
Okay.
one of the reasons why it's good that we're doing this now,
Right.
is that all of your heads are going to be much better than just mine, and you're going to say, well, I want you to run this option, this scenario, this scenario, this scenario. That's not a problem. I can tweak all these things and send them to you.
And then scenario 3 was who gets
Scenario
what?
3 is $800,000, and again, if you want to put it all on
The new guys.
renewals, it's $477. If you split it up, it's $276 to renewals, and it's $965. So it's even more to the initials. And I and that's a real political thing you've got to deal with. I don't want to see you hurting your profession by getting people into it. Based on the national data I'm seeing, your profession makes a good living. There are many years I didn't make as good a living, and I paid more in association fees than they're paying. So it's something you live with. But do you want to do that to your new people? Again, I'm not telling you one way or the other. I'm just saying if it were me, new person coming into the field, I might be a little scared that I'm paying more than the renewal person is.
Can I ask a question? I'm not a board member, but I just wanted to put this out there, and it sounds like Dr. McAloon, you may have kind of touched on this a little, but have you done it, or could you do a scenario, if the board is agreeable to this, where the initial licensees and the renewal fees are the same,
I could, sure.
and then kind of play around with those numbers a little bit?
Okay.
That's where my head was at. So you picked up on what
Okay,
my
good.
thought was.
Okay.
My other question would be about the unknown budget things that we have to deal with. This, we know what our overhead is, et cetera, but then there's this unknown thing that every year gets someday.
Yeah.
And I think it's really tied to how much policing has to be done. So it depends on if we get 5 complaints in a year or 15 complaints in a year,
Yeah.
because all our monies go to that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Now, with other allied health professionals such as osteopathic medicine, the physician assistants, the other ones that the Medical Board of California tends to state in their mission statement that they're, maybe you don't know the answer to this, I don't know, physician surgeons and certain allied healthcare professionals, and through the vigorous objective enforcement of the Medical Practice Act. Some of them have separate boards, and yet it is still, although not officially under the Medical Board of California, but they're still, like, for instance, in their latest newsletter, they're publishing the transactions or the fractions of the podiatrist as well as the physician assistants and et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, they have a much larger group of people. Their fees, I think, are $200. To be licensed in the state of California, it's like nothing.
Yeah.
And it's like, So my question, I guess, is, given that big, huge budget item, which is the policing, basically, is there any other boards that have like different deals with the medical board that basically, no, it's not really a shared, it's maybe shared a little differently?
Maybe Carl could answer that better than me. I really don't know about all the other boards.
As far as shared services?
Well, not so much of a shared service, but you figure, I can't imagine that the physician assistants, I don't know how many you got those in deal.
They have the same shared services that we have.
Right.
For intake and
Right. But
that.
my point is that, in all fairness, they're increasing their fees by $75,000 to every board. You see what I'm saying? It's like, well, is that, really proper? Because we're only using, compared to like the amount of cases that probably go through there from different larger boards, should we bear the same?
Do you mean that, and maybe I'm misunderstanding you, but do you mean to say that the AG's fees shouldn't necessarily be the same for each board depending on the size?
Kind of.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understood.
Yeah,
Or the amount that you're actually billed. You know what I'm saying? Like for hourly.
Well,
Like-
no, and that's what I was getting at. Are you saying that? Yeah, I just wanted to clarify because the rate is probably, I'm sure, is the same for all the clients regardless, and they just bill however long it takes them to
How
do
many
the work.
hours? Yeah, I don't think there's a way around that, unfortunately, because our investigations and our Attorney General's efforts. We do have complicated cases, so you can't say that only our cases are worth half as much.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that maybe by the time maybe there's something we can do here as a board, and I don't know legally if there is, to get it to a certain point before it's turned over to the AG.
Right.
That might save us some money.
And that's what we're doing now with DOI. So we don't have the vertical enforcement requirement anymore. On certain cases, we do use vertical enforcement because of the severity of the case. But right now, it's our discretion if we're going to take it to DOI. So that's what we're doing now. We did that. I think we covered that about last year or something like that for cost savings, because this is all starting to gear up to something. And one of the biggest problems too, and it's nobody's fault, is fiscal, right? That whole transition. We were in the dark there for, I don't know, Carl, like 12 months. And we couldn't, we had no numbers because of fiscal. It wasn't operational. So it's kind of like, what happened now? And that's why we kind of geared up and put in place that temporary $200 because we were uncertain of what's going to happen. Then all of a sudden we get hit with a 30% increase. And we get hit with SEIU contracts, bargaining union contracts. Everybody needs pay raises, to raise everything up. Leases have gone up. Everything has gone up. And so, unfortunately, I'm the guy that is the catcher of all this.
Yeah.
And I need to figure out how to fix it with your guidance.
Well, I think that where I'm looking at is that we're spending over 50% of our budget on things that we have absolutely no control over. So that it makes it hard for us to be fiscally responsible and good stewards when we have no control over 50% of our budget, and especially when we're depending on licensing and renewals for the income. So I think that's a broader conversation than this board itself, and it might be an issue because at the end of the day, all that does is actually hurt consumers, right? Because it doesn't allow for the specialty of oversight that we need for this board and the work that we're doing in the community. So I would be interested in seeking out conversations or being part of conversations that look into that doesn't address the immediate scenarios being proposed. I do have a question about the scenarios, though, because the increases based on the other handout around the current fees and the statutory limits that we have for fees means that we would not only have to increase, but consider seeking another exemption for significantly higher increases. And I'm wondering what is the probability of that, or what is the appetite of that for that to actually happen? Because we have to be realistic. One is putting in the numbers that would work, and the other one is can we actually even get it? Brian, I don't know if you have any insight into that.
That would end up coming up at the sunset report, which we need to submit by December
1st. So, yeah.
I have a related question. There was a comment made that all our income is made from licensing fees. What about enforcement? Where does that money go?
You are getting enforcement money, but it's really minuscule compared to everything else.
So I have another question about things the board gets to consider. I don't know if this is an option or not. So, for example, if you have dings on another license, your driver's license or your malpractice insurance, then you pay a higher rate than people who have not had an incident. Is there a way to increase money on the enforcement side? Because the AG is coming from enforcement. That 30% is work on enforcement, if I understand the process correctly. So
That is
if we
correct.
get a 30% increase in enforcement, shouldn't pro rata that be on people who are getting enforced?
That's
Correct. all sources of income and revenue are welcome. However, I don't think it's going to be that much.
I think it's cost recovery, so they're just basically trying to pay, and it's not a guarantee we're going to get that, because somebody can say, "Hey, I just got slapped, and the cost recovery on this is $30,000." Well, you know what? I want to go do something else. Here's my license.
Exactly.
So it's not a guarantee.
Yeah, and you guys, especially when you compare it to other boards, you don't have very much enforcement. I mean, I know that your AG bill is higher than you'd want it to be. I totally understand that. But if it makes you feel any better, you don't have as much enforcement as, as a lot of other boards.
Volume-wise, maybe we don't, but I bet percentage-wise, when you look at how many people...
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
we're
yeah, no, and I
comparing this
can't
to.
even speak to that because I know you have a very small licensing population. But when I look at, my other boards, I am constantly reviewing proposed decisions and stipulations, and I hardly see any from you guys. So, but again, percentage-wise, you're right. It's probably more in line with everybody else, but...
I think since I've been here, we've seen an increase in complaints, in enforcement actions. I think it's because the visibility is greater. People have access. They know more about the complaint process. So I think that's also increased too.
If you look at on that revenue sheet, you'll see the third item down is unscheduled cost recovery, and it's been averaging about $61,000 a year. So it's not chicken feed; it's like 5%, but it is picking up, but it's not offsetting what your other expenses are. And I can tell you from working in the private sector for many years, even though this was I'm sure a surprise to everybody to see this big increase, my understanding is they hadn't had an increase in about 10 years. And when I look at what you're being billed, it's about 1/5 of what I was being billed when I was at high-speed rail. It was just ridiculous. I think you get what you pay for, and I think you're probably getting a decent rate. You're right, $75,000 hurts, but if you were probably the medical board, that's probably $275,000, because such a large portion of what work goes to them.
Brian, can I ask, what is the current renewal fee with the $200 temporary, including that?
It's $1,100.
And what about for new applicants?
New applicants is $10.49.
Thank you.
Looking at scenario 3, I'm looking at the months in reserve, and it looks like for 22-23, it should probably be around 12 months. That's our 1 year.
Uh-huh.
But it looks like it's going up.
It's going up.
Exponentially almost.
Yep.
So once we hit 2 years or 3 years, can we scale back some of the costs?
Yeah, or we could even scale back this assumption knowing that it's going to continue to go up. And so, I guess what I'm really looking for is direction. These are just examples.
So
but you're right, because it's going up so fast, that tells me that I could bring that number down, and maybe it'll get to 12 months in 4 years or 5 years, but at least you're going in the right direction. You're going up, not down. So maybe if I pull, $25,000 out of that or $100,000 and run a bunch of scenarios, and I'll be happy to do that.
So we could sort of market this as this is
just
temporary
worst case.
to get us back to being stable,
Yeah.
and it may be modified.
Exactly. In the future,
Right.
by then you're going to have a better handle on your I'm assuming that Fiscal will be pretty well implemented. It's only been 12 years. It should be pretty well implemented in the next year or two where Carl can get information much more timely, and you can start and tell where you are. And at that point, if you really needed to dial back, you could. But, it's that whole thing about, once you start taking away, you're really shooting yourself in the foot.
So this is just a snapshot, and we're lucky to have Jeff right here with these scenarios just to give you a flavor of what we can use Jeff for to reasonably come up with a solution, right? These are not set scenarios. Jeff can run any scenario. We just want to give you guys the opportunity to start exploring your options here. And then we can go ahead and charge with what we need to charge with.
I'm sorry. Is there a way that we can get a comparison of the other medical boards and what their costs are and their fees, renewals?
We've seen that before, but
Okay.
you can't necessarily compare just because of our licensee population.
Yeah.
We're charging what we have to based upon our budget.
Right. Well, and my reasoning is, again, we're such a delicate balance of wanting more podiatric doctors coming on board.
Yeah.
And we don't want to, again, put up fees and barriers that'll make this unattainable.
You know, and I don't have this handy, but maybe Kathy can find this in her old files. My last report 4 years ago, one of the last appendices shows all the boards and what their fees are. And I don't know how much that's changed in 4 years, but you can get a sense. Basically, I used it to show the fact that most everybody goes on a biennial basis. But I think I actually have the fee amounts in that. So, Kathy, I don't know if you can look and see, and you could see that. Then you'd have at least an idea. Otherwise, Carl would probably have to get that in.
I have maybe a more relevant question. For example, when we get our degree and can get a license, that's the only kind of license we get. So in reality, what an MD pays and a DO pays is not a relevant barrier to us because we can't get that license. So what they have to pay in reality is not relevant to us because that's not our pathway. What I think is more relevant to barrier to our license is what do other states charge a podiatrist to get their license. I think that's a more relevant piece for our bringing in new docs into California than what MDs and DOs have to pay because that's not a relevant barrier. But for example, if Arizona is half the price of California, will that doctor go to Arizona? Will that doctor of podiatric medicine go to Arizona rather than California? And I don't know what the fees are, so I'm just.
Sure, we can.
I have no idea what California is relative to other states.
Yeah, I mean, we can go online and see what we can.
Because if there's really a barrier.
Medical board's website. They
Oh, is it?
list every single license, and I looked at it, and I think there's like 5 states, Arizona being one of them. Arizona, New York is one of them. Us that are in the higher range, and
Okay.
they all just within $100 or so.
Oh, are
of
they?
each other. So
Okay.
it's not now. There are you see how many podiatrists, and then what happens is too is there's a certain percentage of them of podiatric medical boards per state that don't have separate boards.
Oh,
Turn on your mic.
Oh, sorry. So there's a certain percentage of the boards that don't have separate boards because there's not enough. It's like 47 podiatrists in Montana or something like that. So when you start seeing the states that have like 1,500 plus podiatrists, the fees are higher because they're trying to maintain these boards, and the boards have to be somewhat robust because they have more complaints. I mean, it goes on and on. It just makes sense, right? So, but the thing is the other thing I think to look at is you are asking. A lot of people ask from a small group of people, 2,000 people. So what are the podiatrists in California being asked to pay dues on? Well, one is their license, but then you go to the state associations and their boards that also license them to become national board. If you become board certified, so there are these always ongoing fees. Their DEA license. I mean, it goes on and on, right?
sure.
But on the other hand, podiatrists do make a good living, and it's not like it's the price you pay to work.
Yeah.
And so I think the reality is what, we're going to have to increase these fees, and the way we do it, we have to decide.
Yeah.
But I don't think anyone wants to go to the piece of we don't want to have our own board.
Yeah.
I think there's too many of us to be in that position.
Yeah. What do you get a sense? Do you survey?
It's hard to ask
licensees
right.
What they feel about the board and its performance, and I mean, the reality is I guess they have a decision. They don't have to work here. They could go to another state. And
I honestly think most podiatrists know that they pay a licensing fee, and beyond that,
yeah,
I don't think they think much. I think they're probably more entwined with their state boards, like the American or their national board.
National boards. Yeah.
Because I think that the idea that what we do, that we are a consumer protection agency, I don't,
Yeah.
I'm not so sure they get it.
Yeah. Well, if it's like most places in this country, I mean, it comes down to California, Texas, Pennsylvania, Florida,
That's
all
right.
the large,
Same thing.
New York, all
Yeah.
the large states. Yeah.
For those of them, and they're a lot of them have their people pay. Well, like it's a 2-year thing, right? Their license.
Yeah, almost all. Yeah, most of them are biennial.
I have a question mostly from historical reference, so I understand, because our own board establishment is relatively new, right? Separation from the medical board. So are the numbers that we're seeing today drastically different than the ones that were analyzed when it was decided to separate?
No, in fact, there's no additional fees being added. We don't have additional costs by being a separate board, with the exception of the fact we have 5 staff members. But that's all we had before, even when we were under the auspices of medical board. So our costs are going up as our medical boards, just the same, especially with the AG.
So from the licensees, really, they're getting more specialized oversight from a consumer standpoint, but the cost is still the same, if I'm understanding correctly, based when that analysis was done, other than the increases that are happening right now.
I wouldn't even say more specialized. We were fairly independent on our medical board, and that's part of the reason why we were split out.
Okay. Thank you.
I think until we reach a point where there's parity with the medical board, I don't see podiatrists in California wanting to be subsumed back into medical board. That's not to say in the future that won't be the case. In fact, it would be reasonable, and we would see our costs drop down to what an MD or DO would pay. I don't think we're at that point yet.
When you're talking parity, you're talking about what? Can you explain what you mean by parity?
So the podiatrist's ability to practice medicine to the same level as an MD or DO, where you're not restricted just by location on the body.
Got it. Thank you.
And you seem like you're making progress towards elevating all that.
So my request to you, based upon some of the discussion so far, and I'd also have other board members come up with scenarios, but my thought is, can we produce a scenario of a 12-month reserve over a 24 to 36-month horizon, and keeping the pricing the same for initial licensees and renewal licensees? And if other board members have other scenarios they'd like to see, we need this prior to our documentation for sunset submittal.
Right. So we're probably going to have a teleconference meeting once we get the scenarios, and then run for a board vote of which one to pursue. So Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, we can only do 24 months statutorily, or can you do 36?
Oh, I don't think there's any statutory limitation. And when I looked at the basic document for the fund, there's nothing in there that talks about what the reserve requirements are.
Okay. Carl?
Generally, there is a cap at 24 months.
Okay.
So is that just a standard cap, or just a...
Just in general provisions.
Okay.
I have to go back and double check that for you more, but most boards and bureaus aim to not have a higher reserve than 24 months.
My goal was actually to achieve a 12-month reserve over 24 to 36 months.
Okay,
So
I
rather
see.
than this exponential climb like Dr. Zaff was pointing out, if we taper it a little bit, but our goal is, let's look at what would the fee be at 24 months, what would it be at a 36-month horizon.
And it'd be the same fee for both initial as well as renewal?
That's my thought.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, we'll run those.
I think that's a good approach at it. Just gently ease into this, right, rather than going off. Yeah.
That's a lot of work, so we need regs to bring it back down.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I think that also addresses the renewal versus new without punishing the new people by giving them that pro rata,
Right.
which they are people who haven't made a living yet. So,
Right.
but at the same time, not putting the whole burden on the renewals and I think that's a reasonable
Okay.
compromise to make everyone pay the same for the application and renewal.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go about it, because the ones DPMs that are established, I mean, it's an industry, right? It's a critical component of California's healthcare, right? You might have to absorb that to get the new people up to where they're doing their practice.
Are we currently calling what we're doing like a surcharge, a $200 surcharge? We didn't raise the fee. We're charging an extra.
No, it's a
$200.
temporary fee increase. That's the language in the code, is temporary fee increase. not a surcharge or anything. It's just
I mean,
temporary.
ultimately, you will have to raise the statutory limit.
Right. And that will be the ask. So the ask will be, let's say, the $200 be permanently set in statute, plus an additional XYZ.
Yep.
That would be the ask in the sunset, and that's where that would
I'd
be.
be curious to know at year 2022, 23, if we could drop the 200 and then,
I honestly don't think we'll ever go back. So I think it's like ridiculous to think we would.
Well, I could run some numbers and
I mean, I think
but
if we
I mean,
I
do,
hear what you're saying. Yeah.
we'll say it's a $200 surcharge. We have to raise the actual fee, and we hope to get rid of the surcharge if the expenses don't go up.
Yeah. I mean, we can run the numbers and see but it's going to be additive. It's still going to be 200 plus 400 more or whatever. Yeah.
you mean try to run the temporary fee temporarily for?
I mean, because if in fact this is going to go to 24 months and then 36 months, we'd probably have to lower the fees.
Might, yeah. I mean,
So, let people know that if we achieve our goal, we could back off on this fee increase.
I just don't know how to. Well,
Okay, so the way that the statute's written in terms of what the licensing fees are, it's either going to be a statutory minimum, like you have to charge at least X amount, and then they'll usually give you a cap as well. But most often what I've seen is the licensing fees can be a maximum of blah, 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 whatever it is, 5,000, I don't know, whatever, not 5,000, but whatever. So you have a maximum of whatever the licensing fee is going to be. And then by regulation is when you raise and lower that within that maximum that you have. So you could ask to have the statutory maximum raised to whatever you think that the most you would ever need would be, and then by regulation adjust it up and down as conditions warrant. Statutes can also be crafted so that they are as of blah, blah, blah date until this other date, the fee will be this much. And then you can have an incremental increase in that way, or an incremental decrease, depending on how it's worded. But there's a lot of things that you can do to make it more adjustable. I think the more flexible thing to do in terms of you having control over your own fees is to have a statutory maximum being the highest that you would ever think that you would need it to be, but just not charge that much, and then by regulation make the adjustments as needed. It just requires rulemaking packages, which can take a long time. But if you've projected out, in a timely manner, it shouldn't be too awful.
If I heard you correctly, is that what the approach that you suggest is that we look for the statutory limit to be as high as we think we would need it, but in the budget projections and the analysis have a range that is probably lower than that gives us the flexibility. And in the case of the proposal from Neil, being that we look at a 24 to 36 month horizon to get to the 12-month reserve, that might give us a sense of what that statutory limit is and then what the fees itself would be. Is that?
Yes, and the legislature may not be okay with putting your maximum at as high as you would ever need it to be, because you could, in theory, if you could justify it in a reg package, you could charge that fee. So that might, I'm not necessarily saying that I'm recommending that, but that is the easiest way in a perfect world, in ideal circumstances. But I think it's helpful, if you have a bunch of really good projections in terms of varying scenarios like he's done here, just kind of tailored a little bit more towards options you could provide the legislature of how to reach the same result.
right. I was just going to echo that. I think the more options we have on the plate, just not knowing what the flavor is going to be with the legislature, there might be a more appeasing option for them if we craft some more options. So.
Yeah, and if I run something out to 24 months, which is going to be just absolutely ludicrous, at least then they go, oh, God, we don't have to take this one. This is the worst case, So
Right.
at least I'll include it.
Right. It's going to be a middle ground, right? I think we all want the lower of the middle ground.
Yeah.
Right. The least impact.
Mm-hmm. What's today? Friday? I guess next week.
Great, because we're trying to get this sunset review thing done. Okay, so anybody have any more questions?
Okay, so just so I'm clear, Jeff, you're going to run these scenarios, give them to myself and the staff, Kathy and I, and we will email them to you. And then I guess you would have to respond. How would... I'm just trying to gather how I get your responses without a quorum.
So hold on. So when is the next board meeting? It's December, right?
December
Okay, yeah. So what I would recommend is that
teleconference.
a teleconference. Yeah, like do a teleconference meeting.
And that would be a 10-day posting. So I guess on Monday we'll work on posting it, and remember, I'll send you the email of the Bagley King requirements and ADA compliant room, open to the public and things like that. And it needs to be posted.
If we have dates out of the country, should we tell you that now?
We'll do it after.
Okay,
There's
thank
no
you.
more vacations. It's sunset time.
Nobody gets a vacation.
Not yours.
Okay.
Yeah, you can just email them to me. That's fine.
Okay.
And we'll try
Yes,
to get you
Kathy.
the information so you're aware of what's going on.
And mostly surgeries that we can't.
Okay.
Mostly surgeries that we can't change are scheduled in the morning. So if you could make it in the afternoon.
Okay, we can make it like 3 o'clock. Is that usually a good time somewhere?
I operate all day, so we're gonna have to figure it out.
Okay.
I operate past 3 o'clock, but on only certain days.
Okay, so we'll
We'll figure it out.
Kathy.
Yes.
In consulting with Carl, the numbers that you might need to make your final decision won't be available till October. So I'd hate for you to have another teleconference. It's coming up very quickly. You know, that's one point. The other point is, I think it might be helpful with us in the sunset if there were a motion officially saying that this board wants to keep a minimum of 12 months. That way we can go forward and they'll see that this board was committed to that. And you could go up to 24 months. I mean, as the future goes on, we don't want to hit them too hard, but I think we have to remember it's a biennial. It's not really 800 or 776. It's 350 more every year. So that's one thing I think that if we went up too fast, by the time we got to the next sunset, we would see that we were somewhere between 12 and 24 months. I don't think we're going to get over 24 months. When you look at the scenarios, they were double the 800 to get the 24 months. Yeah. You're not going to raise your fees $1,600 to get that reserve. But if you put into our policy, our financial policy, that we want 12 months, and that's reasonable, it's really unreasonable to go too much lower than that.
I think the motion would be a motion for a 12. Sorry. Green light. I think the motion would be a motion for a minimum of 12-month reserve. Also exploring various avenues to achieve that through scenario-based budgeting.
And when you have your teleconference meeting, you'll be able to see the real numbers.
At least we have something. It's up to the board, but at least we have something right now that would be motioned and approved, if approved, that we can drive on.
Okay. So do you want me to make a motion, or did you make it?
Oh, I can't.
Okay. Let's see if I get this right. So, I'd like to make a motion that we have a construct in place that allows us a budget to show us to get to a 12-month reserve.
Okay, so for clarification, Ileana can help me out here. Your motion is to have the board set a goal to achieve 12 months, correct?
Right. So that's the motion. All right.
With
12-month reserve.
The board have in place a budget which will achieve a minimum of a 12-month reserve
Second.
Okay. Any discussion?
I have a question. Did you want the scenarios to be, as Dr. Mansdorf suggested, which is over to see how that looks over to reach that 12-month goal over 24 to 36 months? Is that, did I understand you correctly? Is that
Yeah, that's one scenario.
okay? So yeah.
Another scenario would be scenario 3, what the fee would be reduced to maintain a 12-month.
Okay, let's go back first.
Okay, let's go back to the original motion.
The original motion is, Kathy, can you repeat it, please?
The board have in place a budget to achieve.
Can I get you to come to the microphone? I'm sorry. Thank you.
I think the motion, and I'll have to look at the tape to make sure it's correct, but that the board have in place I will replace the word budget with financial policy that will achieve a minimum of a 12-month reserve. And I just want to comment the 36 achievement period or 24 months, whatever it is. I mean, this would be a policy that would long endure after the achieving. So it's just
12
permanently, this board is saying keep us with 12 months minimum.
Right. Okay. So that's the original motion. Any more discussion on that?
Was there a second?
Yes.
Yes.
Zam.
Okay.
Okay. So, all in favor?
Dr. Manzi?
Aye.
Miss Elliott?
Aye.
Ms. Cadenas?
Aye.
Dr. Mansdorf?
Aye.
Dr. McAloon?
Aye.
And Dr. Zapp?
Aye.
Passes. Thank you.
All right. Now,
Now there's going to be
what's our second motion?
There's a second motion.
Oh, to achieve it in the...
I'll make a second motion to investigate achieving a 12-month reserve over a 24 and 36-month horizon with licensing fees to be the same for both new licensees and renewals.
I second.
Any discussion? Okay.
Dr. Manzi?
Aye.
Miss Elliott?
Aye.
Ms. Cadenas?
Aye.
Dr. Mansdorf?
Aye.
Dr. McAloon?
Aye.
And Dr. Zapp?
Aye.
The motion passes.
Okay. Are there any more motions regarding this? I have a quick question for about the fees. The retiring physician fee, what is that right now? Is there?
They don't pay any.
Okay. And you have how many of them? There was. It's
Not a lot.
not a lot. Okay.
Were you thinking of charging a minimum fee?
I don't think it's a bad idea. I mean, you're asking a very small group of people to float a pretty big thing. And I think that, at that point, why not? It's sort of like a contributory token, whatever. But I just don't think it's a horrible thing to ask for.
We do take time to process.
Exactly. It costs us money, like you said, $176 an hour or whatever it is, right? So I think that, I don't know if that's a motion or not, but I mean, to consider or when we're doing this.
To add on to that, is there, looking at any other paperwork that we process, are there fees attached to it?
Mm-hmm.
What are they? When's the last time they've been
We
increased?
recently raised them, and it
Okay.
was significant.
Okay.
From 30 to 100 in some cases, and we've heard a little bit about that, but it's still reasonable.
Right.
No, it is. I mean, I think that number that he pulled out, that what it costs us to be doing this, all this stuff, all this processing stuff is really expensive.
Right. And then everything should be on the
It's
table.
getting worse.
I was going to say, did somebody, I mean, I'm not a board member and I'm not the EO, but maybe somebody wants to make a motion to have Brian or somebody on staff look at the current fees that are charged and maybe add to the sunset report if you would either like to have the statutory minimum of the fees raised or changed or add new fees. I'm not saying you want to fee your people to death, but it's definitely, if you're talking about it now, it might be worth looking into.
I have a question. So what is a retiree license?
Andrea?
And if they wanted to say, oh, I don't want to be retired anymore, does it benefit them? They can come back and say, okay, there's a lesser fee to re-enter or something like that. I mean, that could be
Andrea,
something we could attach to
you want
this.
to come up here and join us?
Because, that would be like maybe the selling point of this fee that's attached to the retirement license.
Yeah, so my question is approximately 180 people who have this license, which makes me think there's some value to having it. If it has value, wouldn't you pay for that value?
One of the values, many of the people licensed with us only have a 1-year residency, and some just have a preceptorship. If they lose their license and come back, they have to have a 2-year residency.
So that license has value, and there should be a fee attached to that value, I would think.
Someone can come out of a retired status license. They just have to pay the renewal fee and show proof of 50 hours of their CMEs and one of those continuing competence pathways within the last 2 years. That's all they have to do.
Did anyone do it recently?
Recently?
But you've had people do it.
Yeah, I actually spoke to somebody yesterday who's contemplating either keeping their license current or retiring, but they're just not quite ready to fully retire, but they wanted to know their options. So it's not like they can't come out of that.
So when you say retire, they're not allowed to do prescriptions or do any of that. Okay.
We get a renewal every 2 years that they have to keep up. If after 3 years they don't renew the retired license, it'll cancel. And if they wanted to come back, they would have to reapply.
You know what we could do though? If we charged a fee for it, we could do that. If you did come out of retirement, we would apply those fees towards the application for your full license. You know what I'm saying? If you chose to, in other words, I want a retirement fee. Okay, all right, license. Okay, say we charge, I don't know, $350, $400 for this thing, right? Well, what's that giving me? Well, if you decide that you don't want to be retired anymore, we'll apply that $400 towards your licensing fee for the year you enter or you come back.
I mean, I appreciate this conversation. I'm thinking that what we need is an understanding of what are the fees that we are currently getting. And maybe it's a scenario that is also presented, right? Because we're looking at a very small number of people. And I'm not sure that would necessarily give us enough of input into the income revenue side to impact the time period to reach the 12-month reserve. So I think for the purposes of this conversation, it might just be good if we could ask for a simple overview of what the fees and collections that we're doing outside of the renewal and the new license for the board to be cognizant of that and consider options. I don't think we need a motion for that necessarily, but I'm just in the interest of discussion. I feel like I need a little more information, and maybe, Andrea, when you come back with that, that'd be helpful.
The sheet that we went through earlier shows.
It's already there, so then yeah.
And remember, everybody, we just got done changing all these fees.
Yeah.
So we capped them.
I just like to mention one thing about retired people who are already retired. I think there might be a backlash that wouldn't be worth the money for the people who paid their fees with the idea that in their retirement they would not have fees. So maybe they could be grandfathered in and start with the new retirees.
I don't think it's a bad idea. We can
but I think I'm with,
talk about it in committee.
I think I'm with Maria on this one. I mean, I think there's 190 retired, and if you $50, $100, it really is. It's barely going to cost Andrea's workload. I think So we got to be.
Okay, just a thought.
I'm just not sure if a law would need to be updated. Yeah.
That's the other thing. Yeah, I mean, while these are good ideas that you guys are bringing up, they would require a statutory change because you can only charge the fees that are currently in statute. Basically, the statute says you can charge this fee, that fee, and the other fee. And if it's not on that list, then you can't charge it.
Okay, thank you. So, Jeff, thanks very much.
Just,
Little gloom and doom there, but
well,
what do you got?
We'll come to Jesus meeting. But my sense is that
Real popular guy.
we're gonna kick a lot of ideas around over the next week or so. So you may get a number of these things.
No, seriously, thank you very much.
Sure.
And I think we got this at the right time. Just think if we didn't do a fee study, we didn't do the $200 temporary, I guess I might be, on the street somewhere.
You might be. You'd be fishing. Okay.
I just want to say, while Jeff is here, I just want to say how easy it's been to work with him and how helpful he's been and his experience with one of the intergovernmental agencies that we had for our last fee study. He's since retired and is available as a consultant, and he has been invaluable to us. So thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Sure. Thanks.
Okay, Brian, now we're going to receive and possible action on executive officers report, right?
Okay, okay, here we go. Okay, so we have licensing, Andrea. She's back. Bethany, you had a question? Oh.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Start with the licensing report with the new licenses issued and renewals during the fourth quarter of fiscal year 18-19 between April 1st and June 30th. In April, there were 17 permanent licenses issued. In May, there were 17. And in June, there were 9, for a total of 43 newly licensed DPMs in the fourth quarter. There are currently 20 pending applications with 3 candidates that recently completed their package. And for the fiscal year 18-19, PMBC had 25 applicants come from out of state. 32 were third-year residents from a California program, and 47 were third-year residents from an out-of-state program. Moving on to the renewals. In April, there were 90 renewals mailed with 88 licenses renewed by end of month. May had 84 renewals mailed with 79 licenses renewed by end of month. And June had 82 renewals mailed with 72 licenses renewed by end of month. Delinquent renewal notices were mailed to those that did not comply with the renewal requirements 30 days after expiration. For residents, there were no new residents licensed in the fourth quarter, so there were 123 resident licenses issued for the last fiscal year. Next, we have the American Podiatric Medical Licensing Examination Part 3 update. The last APMLE Part 3 exam was administered on June 5th, and there were a total of 25 candidates that requested their scores be sent to California. Of those candidates, 25 passed for a 100% pass rate. The next Part 3 exam will be held on December 4th, and candidates wishing to participate in the next exam will need to register by November 22nd, 2019. Now we have the residency program approval process and the application updates. At the June 7th meeting, the board suggested reviewing and possibly updating the residency program approval applications. A copy of the application is included for review and discussion. We also included a couple documents from the Council on Podiatric Medical Education, their procedures for approval of podiatric medicine and surgery residencies, as well as standards and requirements for approval of podiatric fellowships.
Now, on this right here, you guys requested maybe have CPME come for a presentation. I still haven't been able to get a hold of them. They're in Maryland, and I don't think they would fly somebody out here, but I was thinking maybe telephonically or something, so you can have, but I still haven't contacted, and I was hoping, Judy, I know everybody's busy, but maybe Dr. McAloon, do you have any contacts with CPME that we can talk about the residency program and how they approve them with their... rather than what we've had, we have it in our regulations, and Andrea printed out what was on their website here. But for a discussion, I just can't find the right contact, the person there to initiate that.
I can help you with that.
What's that?
I can help you with that.
Okay, Dr. Zapp can help. Okay, perfect.
I'm on a residency review committee.
Oh, perfect.
Oh,
so
let's ask you then.
Yeah, we could ask you then. Maybe the whole reason I asked for this was it was brought to my attention that, all the third-year residents get the same licensing, get the same license that we, give here in the state of California. And this sheet of paper for their application, we're just assuming that these programs are being looked at, by the Council on Podiatric Medical Education and approved, on a regular basis, and that someone's actually making sure that the amount of cases that these residents are doing, are fulfilled, et cetera. And so as a board, I guess, just so the biggest expense we have is policing, just to protect ourselves. I think that I just would like to hear a little more information regarding how robust this overseeing process is, I guess, is my point.
Green light. Could you put a little insight on that, maybe?
Yeah, the every 2 years, the residencies file an application with the Council on Podiatric Medical Education, and they're reviewed. And every approximately 3 or 4 years, they're actually inspected by a team of inspectors, a team of podiatrists selected from around the country. And they have you have in this packet the regulations that they're held to, and there's a checkoff list, and every one of those requirements is looked at. The number of cases, the type of cases, the variety of cases. They want to make sure that if they do one particular case, they don't log it as 4 cases. It has to be, you have to pick one category. So it's a pretty thorough exam, and the people that do it take it very seriously. So as long as they are certified by the Council on Podiatric Medical Education, I think we can safely assume that it's an adequate residency.
So with that being said, just for the board's knowledge, I think it was either 1 or 2 years ago, they changed not so much the requirement, but how they define first or second assist or whatever, how they define whether or not the resident did the case and what their participation level in the case was, because they added more slots to some of these programs. Kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say diluting it, but, there's more and more, the change of the Medical Practice Act. There's more and more broader things that these residency programs, some of them are doing now. And it's just, I was just curious as to, how that's going down as far as, are these numbers really being met? Because they're getting a license. Basically, everyone gets the same license here. And I know you could then say, well, it's up to the surgery center, or it's up to the hospital, or it's up to the community hospital, whatever, to say whether or not these people are competent in doing these particular procedures. But some podiatrists could go out in their office and, no one knows what they're really doing there. So my point is that I was just like to know what, I guess, how this overseeing of, or how the change in their numbers, is it affecting it, in a good way or a bad way? I mean, observing a case is much different than doing a case, I guess, is my point.
The medical directors are responsible for making sure that the residents log their cases accurately, and that if the resident states that they are a first assist, that in fact happened. And we, if the residency director, I guess, wants to be sneaky, I don't know how we would find that out.
That's not that. It was just, it wasn't so much the residency directors, it was the Council on Podiatric Medical Education. So all I'd like to do is suggest that the licensing committee maybe look a little more into this during this committee work. Just review this packet pretty closely and review, the programs we're, approving. Because we just stamp these through with this 1-page thing. And I want them to understand what we're stamping through. Right. That's all.
And just to add, I'm not too sure if this is when they turn in this application, if they just turn in this simple application, or if there's any backup to it that the board could review. Because again, we're just getting the initial applications to approve.
So yes, but we wouldn't, that application, those programs have already been approved by CPME. Some of them might be in delinquency or something. They have to change a couple things before, because we've seen those come through, that they haven't fixed whatever they were supposed to fix. So that's true. There is some oversight that we're counting on CPME, but I just want our licensing committee to truly understand what all these programs that we're licensing, like the differences, the similarities, their historic, record, before we just stamp them on through. And I think also the licensing committee needs to look into fellowships in the state of California, and like, what does that fellowship? It might mean that it means nothing, but I'd like to at least know what fellowships are being offered in the state of California, because there are some now. And who's overseeing those, and what does that even mean?
CPME has a list of fellowships on their website as well, and we did include their standards and requirements for that. I don't know if those are the only ones.
Right. So I do appreciate all this information, because I know I had asked for it from the licensing committee, but I just want to make everyone aware why I was overseeing this application. That's all.
Are there any requirements for a fellowship? Is there some rather informal ones around, and I'm not sure all of them are listed.
I'm not sure what the requirements are. It's not required for licensure. They don't have to have a fellowship to get licensed with us.
A 2-month wound care fellowship that even foreign medical graduates could attend, as well as podiatrists. So it seems it seems almost haphazard.
Well, CPME, and you have the fellowship requirements in there. It lists what their requirements are for a fellowship. So we can.
Because think about it, a podiatrist is going out there, they're getting a residency somewhere, they're getting their licensed in California, and then they're getting a fellowship certificate. They're telling the general public, hey, look at me, I've done this, 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 and this. Do we know about these? So what if we have a complaint that comes to us and says, well, I went to this guy because, look, he has this fellowship, and don't you guys know anything about any of this?
Well, it's not a requirement for licensure.
No, I understand that.
Is what's required. It's kind of just like an additional training.
Sorry to interrupt. But can I ask that we hold off on the discussion of the fellowships until a future meeting, because it's not agendized?
Sure.
Thank you.
So I want to just make the comment that the licensing committee will look into this a little more. And so maybe we can put it on a future agenda, okay?
Okay.
Okay, fine.
Fellowships and residency are two different things, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
Well,
Okay,
kind of.
Fellowship information was included in the board packet.
Okay, well.
But I do think that I don't have a clear enough presentation.
Oh yeah,
You
of
know,
course, yeah.
Yeah, I think we'll do some committee work on this and tidy it up a little bit. But I
Yes.
think this information was for your information
Right.
at this point.
And thank you. Appreciate it.
And we just have the 3-month timeline.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all.
All right. So here's my thing about the 3-month timeline, or our next board meeting, as we said, is after the
December 7th.
It's December 7th.
December 7th, and our deadline to for sunset is December 1st.
So is this something you'd want to consider having a board meeting before December 7th?
Well, I'm still reaching out to the committees to see if the December 7th is going to be okay if we're just 4 or 5 days late from approved submittal of the sunset. So
once you know that,
then once I know that, then we can.
Okay, so we're not going to
to
change this date right now. Okay, great, thank you.
Or December 7th, 6th. Somebody's birthday is December 7th, that's why I can. It's embedded in my head.
All right, great. Next, we have our enforcement program update and a possible action. Dr. Mansford.
Okay, I will fly through this because I think board members have already read through it. This covers the period of April 1st through June 30th, and it also has the complete synopsis of years 2018-19 versus 17-18. Complaint data, a total of 32 complaints were received, which is a 20% decrease over last year. Average days to close are about 13 days right now, which is above our 10-day target. And some of that was attributed to a delay in printing some of the complaints for distribution and investigation. That's been cleared up. That seemed to cover, or it affected 3 cases. Investigation data, 37 desk investigations were assigned, 10% decrease over last year, where 33 desk investigations were closed. Processing time increased 102%. Which was also attributed to NBC staff being out of the office more than usual. This seems to happen periodically, and staffing problems are an issue everywhere. I'm trying to find new staff myself. 6 investigations were assigned to the field, which is a 100% increase over the fourth quarter last year, and 8 field investigations were completed. Case times increased to 227 days, which is above our 125-day target. We are still a model board compared to some of the other boards. DOI, or Department of Investigation staffing issues, hopefully they're catching up and getting new staff members. Disciplinary data, 5 disciplinary cases were initiated during the fourth quarter, which is quite a bit over last year. And 2 final orders went into effect. No citations were issued this quarter. And we added 1 new probationer this fourth quarter, so we have a total of 9 probationers, which seems to be our average. The enforcement statistics for the full year, our complaint initiation average days had increased, which it increased 43%, but we're still within the 10-day target. It used to be 9 days, but that's the only thing that DCA has actually increased. Investigations assigned increased 15%, and let's see. So our average days to complete investigations are 163, still above the 125-day target, but we still look good relative to other boards. 5 final orders were issued this financial year compared to 10 last year, and we are still dealing with some cases that are legally complicated. 3 citations were issued this year as compared to 7 citations last year. Now, for Attorney General cases, Section E, 5 new cases were forwarded to the AG's office, and currently we have 17 cases. It says 16, but apparently we have another one now. 17 cases pending at the AG's office. So if you look at Attachment E, that nice thick list of cases pending, and you can just see dollar signs flying out of our budget because they are expensive, and the longer they're there, the more they're costing us. I think we should have a couple falling off shortly. Yeah. DCA performance measures. We had talked about this at the last board meeting. The data is available online. We have years 16, 17, and 17, 18, which show how we can look at our own data and also compare to other boards. It's a very powerful tool, and it's worth taking a look at. 2018-19 was submitted, but it still hasn't been posted yet. Now, Attachment G looks at complaints received since we implemented continuing competence. It's an interesting graph which showed a steady decline of complaints against podiatrists, which carried through up until about 2011. And since that time, we've been noticing it steadily inching upwards. And the question is, why? Is it because people are more aware of the complaint process? Is it because there's more podiatrists in the state, there's more patients, and perhaps more people who want to complain and be heard? We're not sure why yet, but it's a trend we'll continue to follow, because more complaints, it also means it's going to cost us a lot more. So another reason or justification for our budget increase. Probation cost recovery recoupment was $18,246, a little higher than average, but if you recall, Fiscal had delayed our sending out bills, so it's just a recoupment or catching up on our typical recoupment. And getting to item 3, consultant and expert program update. We had the training program for consultants and experts at the Western on June 21st. We had a total of 8 individuals show up out of our group of 11, and I understand it was well received, and I'd like to thank Bethany for setting that up. Thanks for all that you do. And we could always use more. So if anybody knows any more consultants or experts who might be interested, we welcome them. Which leads me to the next. Can't talk. Leads me to the next item, where the Enforcement Committee has recommended we accept 2 applicants, Dr. Karen Rubel, who has applied to be a consultant for the Board of Podiatric Medicine, or Podiatric Medical Board of California. A little history on Dr. Rubel. She's a past 2-term board member of the medical board and was also past president of CPMA and is an outstanding candidate. Dr. Frank Case, who has been a consultant for the Board of Podiatric Medicine, has just termed out and has expressed an interest to carry on as an expert for the board. So I'd like to make a motion to accept Dr. Karen Rubel for consultant to the Podiatric Medical Board of California and Dr. Frank Case as an expert to the Podiatric Medical Board of California.
I will second those.
Great. Any discussion? Okay. So we have a motion to accept both candidates as consultants.
Dr. Manzi?
Aye.
Ms. Elliott?
Aye.
Ms. Cadenas?
Aye.
Aye.
Dr. Bailey?
Aye.
Dr. Zapp?
Aye.
Quick comment, real quick. Sorry, and maybe this is for you, Brian. So when we have a report, I know that the recommendation just says receive and file. When there is a vote, can we make sure that we put it in the front cover of the report?
Okay.
Just for transparency.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Neil, I have a quick question about enforcement. So, how many? You said you had an increase in the complaints, it's like 37 complaints or whatever it was. How are we doing as far as like what happens when the complaint comes in? Like, so we can maybe not have to put them all forward to be, sent to the HE's office.
Actually, I'll let Bethany explain.
Yeah, Bethany, please enlighten me.
All of the complaints don't go forward to the AG's office, but everyone has to be investigated at least to some extent. So a lot of them get stopped at the desk investigation phase. We might send it to a consultant. If it's out of our jurisdiction, we close it right there. But they all have costs associated with them. So very few actually go forward to the AG's office. We might see, this year we've got quite a few more because investigations are wrapping up and they've increased their staffing, and so they're getting completed. But normally I've seen about 5 or 6 cases closed per year with the AG. So that's our probationers or individuals that have a license revoked or surrendered. Sometimes the public letter of reprimand. But there's very few cases that actually go that far. And
the complaints that come in and they're done on the desk, that's to our expert witnesses look at them first?
The consultants have the first level review. Then if the case goes forward for field investigation, say a consultant found an issue, we're going to send it forward to the field, and that's when the expert will take a look at the case.
But the desk investigation, the initial investigation is done by a podiatrist? Yes. One of these consultants?
Yes.
Right, okay. Another quick question while you're here, this sort of is this. When a person has relinquished their license to the state of California and then for whatever reason wants to come back, the process for them to get their license back, they have to petition us, correct? So when that happens, do they petition the entire board? Do we hear about that? Or does that just go to the licensing committee?
It would come forward to you at the end of the petition process. for a vote, just like any other discipline case.
But initially, to look at that application, who does that?
It goes to the medical board, and they determine that they have
The Medical Board of California?
Yes, through the shared services. Everything comes through my desk as well for overview, but they actually have the application. We get maybe
Not the Podiatry Board? Originally, it initiates at the Medical Board?
there's a few different forms that we use of medical boards, such as like the 801 reporting, 805 forms, and the petition form.
So I have to jump in. We're off topic.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so how do I get this? I want to clarify this because we're not with the medical board anymore, right? So then why is it going there?
Right, we'll go ahead and put it on the agenda, and
Okay.
we can also talk about it in committee.
Okay, great.
Okay.
And the fees associated with that. Great. Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
That concludes my report.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay. Legislation report.
Good news on the legislative program, and Kathleen is going to come forward and fill us in.
Okay. Good morning. The legislative report is a very positive thing today. I think you'll be very happy with the results. Today is the last day for bills to either be enrolled or to be considered two-year bills. 3 of the 4 that we're looking at have been enrolled as of today, according to Capital Track. So we'll start at the beginning. Attachment A, and you can tell me if you'd like your materials in a different way. What I've been doing is pulling the legislative copy, putting it in a Word document, and highlighting in yellow the areas where the word podiatry or podiatric medicine is listed that hopefully will save you a lot of reading. And I try to number the pages too. So if we look at the first one, which is AB5, worker status, employees and independent contractors, I believe you have had a very good result from your association's lobbying efforts, and you have been included in the section. If you look on page 5 of the attachment A, the word podiatrist has been added to physician and surgeon, dentist, and psychologist. So you're carved out. No one would really think that you were an employee. And we just wanted to make sure that you were included in this carve-out so that you didn't have to debate whether or not you were or weren't. Any comments on this? I mean, this bill is way bigger than us, but at least we have been excluded in terms of this debate of employee or independent contractor. And this is going to affect a lot of things, but hopefully it won't affect you as a professional. So that was done. I think it was enrolled this morning. And at the beginning of the process, if you look at the earlier reports, you were not included there. So that was a great achievement of your association. Any questions about AB5, workers' comp? Okay. The next bill, unfortunately, is the one that did not pass. It does directly affect you. And that is the AB 407, fluoroscopy and radiography permit or certification and continuing education exceptions. At the beginning of the month, I could see that it was put on the suspense calendar, and at the end of last month, I expected it to go forward. We didn't hear any question about, any opposition. I did go on the internet and print out the only opposing groups were the California Radiological Society, the California Society of Radiological Technologists, and That was it. In support was the California Orthopedic Association, the California Podiatric Medical Association, and the California chapter of the American College of Cardiology. So I don't know why it didn't go. It is not dead. It's considered a 2-year bill, and whatever the debate was, I think will be cleaned up for next year. So it's just a little delayed.
It must be what it's associated with. There must be other things in this bill. I'm sure it's not this thing.
I don't know what it is. I called someone to find out, but I didn't get a response for you today. I'm sorry. But we all know that this is a likely bill to pass. And as you can see, Brian sent your letter of support back in June for AB 407, the Medi-Cal Podiatric Services Bill, which is a great success for you. And that did get enrolled on September 3rd. So that's a done deal, and you will now be able to bill for podiatric services. So 407, there was no debate. 678, no debate. And I think you all are familiar with these bills because they're the same we looked at last board meeting. Nothing has changed. So I'd like to go on to SB 425. That is the Healthcare Practitioner's Licensee File Probationary Physicians and Surgeons Certificate on Professional Conduct. So what this bill is obligating us to do is to keep a separate file of all licensees and to create a history if there are complaints. Now, I'm not sure how that's going to play out. We don't have all the regulations yet on this or even the guidance part of it, but it is going to go through. So we are included. And I really don't know to tell you how that will play out. I can read for you a summary, but I think it's all there. I think everything's in there. If you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, these central files that we keep are confidential, but I believe that what the reason is that they want a comprehensive substantive file on someone should we get another complaint. And I'm just not sure what comprehensive means because I think that was part of the debate. What is a comprehensive file? So those things are not going to affect the general licensee. And I think at the next meeting I'll be able to tell you how this relates to disclosure and other issues to the public, which is really the essence of that bill.
It's crazy. You would think this already exists.
Senator Hill, I think, has tried. So, yes, he's getting, you would think.
Hi, let me jump in for a second. The board is currently required to maintain a central file for its licensees. What this bill changes actually is changes it from a comprehensive summary to just a summary. And so that is where it's a little bit unclear, like, what does this really look like? Because it's really hard to do a comprehensive summary, or it's hard to do a summary. Currently, you do a comprehensive summary if somebody asks for a complaint, but you have to do it in a way that doesn't disclose the identity of the complainant. And so it's hard to do a comprehensive summary. So I think this bill is probably trying to address how to do a summary for somebody who asks without disclosing the identity of the complainant. So it's making it a little bit more, I don't want to say the disclosure is a little bit more vague.
Watered down.
So that, yeah, because you're basically trying to protect the identity of the people who are involved in this, besides because obviously if it's about the licensee, you know the licensee is involved. But you're just basically trying to protect the patient's information.
Okay.
I think when we implement it, we'll see how it's really going to work. But that is now law and has been enrolled as well. So the legislative cycle for this year is over. Governor has to sign some other bills, but basically we won't start again until January on the legislation. However, regulation, we've been pretty busy. I think you can see that our regs have gone through for our name change. So the new regulations are probably in print right now, and they have our new name in them. That was just a non-substantive change. So that went through pretty simply. I don't imagine there's any questions on that, but if there are, please let me know.
Okay. Do we have any other things to report for legislative program? No?
No.
Okay, great. Any questions or discussion here? Okay, great. So, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, let's move on to public education. Darlene?
Okay. As stated, this is the public education program report. And this is basically a receive and file. The public education program update includes just discussion of future topics for the newsletter for Footnotes. Footnotes Spring and Summer Edition has been submitted to the Department of Consumer Affairs for publishing. I know Kathleen is always looking for more topics for next newsletter. I think, here we are. The other topics for our articles that we've been discussing in the committee is diabetes, vascular issues, wound care, amputation prevention, heel pain, podiatric medical visits via telephone, sports activities, well-fitting shoes, helpful foot products, aging foot, and childhood to senior years. The deadline for submitting any articles or ideas for fall and winter 2019 edition has been extended to September 30th, 2019. Direct outreach to licensed and stakeholders regarding Board of Podiatric Medicine name change to the Podiatric Medical Board of California is continuing. The staff and has been continuing communicating with licensees and our stakeholders through our websites, newsletters, listservs, and social media. And these efforts will continue to focus on the board's name change in 2019. And so that's pretty much it. If there's any questions, please let me know.
I do have I'd like to interview the public members of the board, and so I'd just like you to know that I'm going to send you an email with a phone call. Maybe we can have a conversation. We'd like to feature in the next newsletter if we're not filled with copy.
Right.
Which please feel free to forward to me, but if not, maybe we'll feature our non-doctor board members, and then in the spring we will feature our podiatric board members.
And is it possible, I know sometimes scheduling an interview is difficult, but maybe just standard questions that you would ask that we could fill out and just send them to you, and then you can keep them in the queue?
Yes.
Okay.
That's a good idea. All right. I have some materials for the board. These are examples of this is Arizona's and this is North Carolina's,
Great. Thank you.
newsletter. And I was looking at the Medical Board of California's newsletter that just came out recently, which I'm sure you've seen. But, I thought one thing I really liked about it was they did the questions that come in off the website.
Oh.
They did a little section on that. So it might be something curious as to what people are asking questions on the website, So that might be a thought, to add to the.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then. Okay. So, have anything more with that?
No,
Okay.
just to mention that we're also in the process of changing BPM to PMBC, and maybe in January we can have everybody start to scour through our website. If
you find
we're
it
not up to par, we'll just need a lot of feedback because
Great.
it's hidden everywhere. We just find it everywhere, and then we make our request to update, but it's endless. How the web is below. Oh, we didn't see that one. Okay, so.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, now we're on to executive management.
On cue,
Right.
because we're going to talk about BPM, PMBC, all these different changes in the administrative manual. So, and there's going to be some, I guess, some ideas to change a little bit of the manual, and maybe some possible motions to make these changes happen to the administrative manual. So everybody has a copy of the administrative manual in their packet, right?
Yep.
As you see all the red lines. So a lot of these are pretty straightforward. And Ileana, thank you. It's where you find BPM and PMBC. It's everywhere. I mean, even I said, I got to get used to PMBC. So that would be the first motion. Do we need to? Can we motion it all together, or should we just separate it out?
You can do it all together, but on the off chance that there are parts, when we get into more of the nitty gritty in terms of the frequency of board meetings and the officer elections and officer terms, you may want to do those individually just in case, just to make it more clear.
All right, so
easier.
I would like to make a motion that everywhere that you see in our manual that we change the title from Board of Podiatric Medicine to Podiatric Medical Board of California. So is everyone in agreement with this? Is there any, that's the motion, to change it in our manual.
Mansdorf, second.
Okay. Any discussion regarding that?
Well, that includes the initials, too.
Yes, and the initials. So any reference to the Board of Podiatric Medicine becomes the
Podiatric Medical Board
of California.
Okay.
All right. So I have a motion, and Dr. Mansdorf seconded it. So should we take a vote on this?
Yes.
Okay. Are you listening to this? Okay. All right. So all in favor? Oh, okay. Oh, sure. So the motion is to accept the change in the in our manual to change the name of the California Board of Podiatric Medicine to the Podiatric Medical Board of California, and anywhere it's referenced in full or in initial, that it be changed. And Dr. Mansworth seconded it. I did. Right. Aye.
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 Okay. So if everyone turns to page 6, I think that's the next discussion. Correct, Brian?
Frequency of board meetings.
Yes. Chapter 2.
Yes, page 6.
Okay. So we talked about changing the frequency of board meetings. So the statute says we have to hold at least 3, and we'd like to change that to say it has to hold at least 2. Not to say that we're only going to hold 2.
Okay, so on that one, it was amended it was 3 meetings per mandatory per calendar year. The statute changed to 2. Yeah. So we need to make that by law, because it's now law. It's only required 2. 1 in Southern California and 1 in Northern California, rather than 3. So they changed that last year.
Okay. So all we're saying is that now it's going to be reflected in our manual.
Yes.
Right. So if we do choose to have 2 meetings for
We could.
cost savings measures, we'd be in compliance with our administrative manual. That's why we're going over a couple of things to get to the very end of the executive management when we have to make some decisions.
Okay.
Yeah, this is just making your manual current, like I'm compliant with the state statute already.
Okay. Do you want? We don't have to vote on that, right? Or,
I think we can wrap it. We can wrap it up
Okay.
in the whole package here. And let's go to officer elections, which is page 14.
actually, you have to back it up to page 13. So right now we have officers of the board for 1 year, right?
Right, there it is, officers of the board for 1 year. And we had, Dr. Manzi, you can.
Yeah. So we had this discussion that, every time you change officers, particularly the president, you got to get a new stamp. You got to there's like a few things involved in it, as you all know, because you've all done this, right? So the proposal is particularly if we do decrease the amount of board meetings that we're having in a year, to just keep the elected officers going for 2 years as opposed to 1 year at a time.
And some of the reasoning behind that is as we get new board members, they become comfortable within their committees. They start to understand, especially some of the complex committees, the licensing and the enforcement. Once you get comfortable, you're on to another one, right? So I think as far as value to the committee for 2 years, as people get comfortable to really navigate that committee to its full potential, I think 2 years would be reasonable. And then also what happens is every time we elect a new president, we have to do sir, and it takes, that we do that in December. We are not up and running with the new president's signature for the wall stamps for 3 or 4 months, so we're backdated on that. So 2 years would be, I think we did that with Dr. Zapp. He did 2 years, and it worked out really well. And that's what the Executive Management Committee kind of came up with. So that would have to be a change in our administrative manual for 1 year up to 2 years. Or would it be, I guess, 2 years?
2 year, automatic 2 year term.
Automatic 2 year term. Well, let's just put that in our bucket. So that's two things. We have election of officers. Right, we got frequency of board meetings we're changing. Should we just motion them?
Okay, hold on. So from what I've gathered is that, okay, so you've talked about changing the terms from 1 year to 2, but the officer elections part you haven't really talked about because that is currently you have it scheduled for your last meeting of the year. And there was discussion, my understanding is that it's going to be to change that to an earlier meeting of the year. Not the last meeting of the year.
I would recommend the officer elections be available at any meeting rather than the last meeting of the year, meaning that would be December, just in case we do have to halt back on our meeting 3 to 2 or whatever it might be. So we're just not held to December. We can actually elect officers during this meeting and then continue forward.
So I want to make sure that I understand. So because if you only have 2 meetings a year, you're right. If you have the elections only on the second meeting of the year, that's probably December. But if you have a teleconference meeting, for example, you could hold your elections, prior to December, in addition to having it at the first meeting of the year if you only have 2. Am I confusing everyone, or does this make sense?
I know everybody's got that.
Sorry, did I just make it worse? So if you only have 2 meetings a year, and if you follow the current administrative manual, which says that your elections are at the last meeting of the year, so let's just say you have 2 meetings a year, and one of them's in March and the second one's in December. And if you have any teleconference meetings, you're not limited to 2 meetings. So you have the one in Southern California, one in Northern California, and then you have this other teleconference meeting because you need to talk about something. You, in theory, could have your elections at that teleconference meeting. It wouldn't limit you to have it at the first meeting of the year.
So basically the language would be you can elect your officers whenever you want during the year.
Whenever it's convenient or whatever.
It just gives us more flexibility.
That's fine.
Okay.
Any discussion regarding that? Anybody kind of opposed to that?
I mean, I think it's, from my perspective as the attorney, I think it's a little weird to have it at a random time in the year. Right. But I also understand why if you have it at the last meeting of the year and it takes 3 to 4 months to get the heading or, to get the stamp created. And then if you have a sunset year, it's also
a mess
too. So I get that. So I just wanted to.
Just a concern for consistency. So say we have an election, say June, and then the next year we can't do it till September. So how does that work on the terms? I mean, is
I think
that
the
going to
fi-
be an issue?
I think it's the physical year would still remain the same, correct?
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So you might want to just, include in the motion when the terms would start.
Okay.
See, even if your elections are in June and you have a meeting also in December,
Right.
the new elected positions don't start until January to
yeah.
the new calendar year.
Okay.
So just make sure
Okay.
that the motion's clear on that.
Okay.
And then I think what's our next one here?
Oh, it's committee delegations, but I think we should discuss that one separately,
Okay.
just because
It's, a little
complicated, yeah.
Okay, so can I have a motion regarding the things we've just discussed?
So
Which would
frequency of board meetings, officer election, officer term duration. Is that what, yes. Okay, it would be those items.
Want to make a motion? Okay.
So you're seeking for a motion, so I'll motion. I'll motion that we amend the administrative manual to reflect that there will be a minimum of 2 meetings a year, that officer terms will be for 2-year durations, starting, I would say, the first meeting of the year, and that officer elections may take place at any board meeting during the year.
I second that motion. Any discussion further? Okay. Aye.
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 Nay?
Aye.
Nay.
Okay. Okay, so what's the last thing in the manual, Brian?
I wanted to clarify because part of the reason that this was brought up was to make it easier for the sunset report. So do you want to do the elections today? That was my understanding, is that if this passes, that the elections for the new officers would be today, so that you would know in time to get the new heading sorted out for the stamp for your sunset report.
So that would mean if Dr. Manzi was elected, there would be a 3-year term.
True. Or maybe more discussion needs to be had. Sorry, now that I'm thinking about this some more.
My
Yeah,
understanding was that the current terms are standing as they are. We may elect for the next term now, but the current officers and board members are as is throughout this term until a new term election is going to be held. Now, if we want to have a new term election for next year today, that's up to the board to discuss. But my understanding of the motion was that it was not to extend terms beyond 2 minutes to 2-year terms, nor to extend the current terms that are currently in place.
Right, but I think Dr. Zapp's question was geared towards, well, if we have elections today and Dr. Manzi is elected president again, then she has this current term that she's currently serving, and then when he said extended 2 years, it's the next term that she would have if she were reelected would be an additional 2 years. Am I right? And that's what you mean? Okay.
So now we're talking about a 3-year term, not 2-year.
How do we?
Well, I mean,
We
that's-
retrograde that.
That's just in effect what it would look like.
How about-
I mean, someone
That's
else
true.
obviously could be president. I
do it
mean,
that
it's
way.
not.
You have 2 years, but I already served 1 year, and we all already served 1 year, and we all stay on these same committees. Because honestly, to keep switching these committees is just.
Well, so do you want the 2-year term to be a seat? And this is where it gets complicated.
Exactly.
How could it be retro? Like, starting, if we did it today,
Right.
your term will,
It would, yeah.
it would be prorated, right?
Yeah, time
Yeah.
served.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
Yeah, make a motion that
would
when we get
include
to the
this
part
term.
of submitting officers for the committees, and you make a motion that all committees and officer positions stand, then maybe we can make a motion there that the prorated time served
Will
is
count
there,
towards
and then,
this new.
and then your next term is going to be,
how do we,
Sure.
or can we vote on it now saying at the next vote, No, never mind.
Okay, with that,
I made that
okay.
way too complicated in my head.
Does that motion work? Okay, so let's try to put it into words. Help me here.
Can you put that on replay?
Okay, so
Okay, so you want to make a motion
I'll make a motion.
to prorate the existing, are we electing officers? Or?
Well, my question is if
That was the end goal.
It was a positive. Yeah, my understanding was that if you changed the elections at any meeting of the year, or if you changed the
Day
the
that you're
requirement that
electing,
the elections happen at the last meeting of the year to any other time, that you would potentially have elections today in order so that the stamp could be prepared for the sunset. So you would know who the board president would be when the sunset was actually happening.
But I think the intent is that the 2-year would continue from now, not reset.
Yes.
Yeah, just continue, yeah.
Like this is the
This
first year of the
current term-
2-year terms.
So that this current term is now 2 years instead of one?
Correct. Can we do that?
That was,
That's a good motion.
okay, that wasn't what you guys just voted on?
We understand that.
Okay, so,
We amend that motion?
well, you already voted on it, so.
Because we do want that to happen too. The motion. We
Okay,
do want the
so-
motion to happen.
We do want that
But
to
we need to
happen
make
for-
exception for where we are today.
I'm sorry, I'm so confused. Okay,
Yeah.
There you go.
all right, so,
Something of the sort. too.
okay, so yeah, you definitely would need to vote again,
Okay.
just
So
to make
Kathy,
sure
you
that
wanna read
everyone
it?
is on the same page and everyone is agreeable to this.
Okay. I make a motion that.
Okay.
Point of information.
Oh, sure.
Shall be 2 years, which will apply to current officers.
And can we include committees?
So there won't be any elections at this
It's just gonna
meeting
be
because
as
of
Correct.
Okay, and Dr. Zaff has a question.
I voted against
So-
the original motion.
Oh, okay.
I would vote for this motion the changes in this motion.
So you like this one better?
Yeah.
Okay. And
I
Dr.
don't
Mansdorf
like
doesn't
it.
seem
I
to
mean,
like it.
I'll accept the current administration for another year. But, I don't like having 3 meetings a year. And
So it would still be 2 meetings a year, but it would just give you the option of having additional ones if you wanted to.
Right. We could have as many meetings as we want a year. This is just putting it, just being in compliance with what's
With the
now.
law.
Right. So
happening.
the first, that's why I kind of wanted to do these separately. So the first, in addition to changing the references to the name to make them, accurate to what the current name is, the statute has been changed so that you used to have to meet 3 times a year. The statute now says you have to meet 2 times a year. So that change to the manual really is just being current with the statutory update. So that's neither here nor there. I mean, we have really no choice on that one. It's just making it official in your manual. The other issues really are about the 2-year terms and when the elections are going to be. So those are the things I thought that you wanted to re-vote on, or you wanted further discussion because you may have changed your minds as to what you wanted the 2-year term and the officer elections to look like.
Yeah, so my understanding, just because before we get more tangled up, is that we can have the 4 meetings a year that we've been having, but our manual just sets a minimum.
Exactly.
So that doesn't really change how often we're meeting, because otherwise I would have concerns. But
Right,
I think
right.
it's just setting a minimum base. And then in terms of the 2-year terms, we just set it as 2-year terms for the officers and committees, and then the elections to be on the first any time during the year, with the term starting on the first meeting of the year. And that passed. And right now what's being considered is either an extension of 1 year for the current officers and committees, so that their term ends at the end of next year, or 2020. Is that?
That's what I understood too.
Okay, so there's one motion that we need right now then,
Okay.
that to extend the current officers and committees terms for 1 year.
Is that your motion?
I motioned that.
Okay.
All right. I second that motion. Any discussion?
So that means that the one motion we have already can stand.
Right.
And we're just adding this new motion.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
All right. No discussion? Dr. Manzi?
Aye.
Ms. Elliott?
Aye.
Ms. Cadenas?
Aye.
Dr. Mansdorf?
Aye.
Dr. McAloon?
Aye.
Dr. Zapp?
Aye.
A unanimous vote. Passes.
Okay. Anything more in that manual?
Yes.
Oh, God. Okay, let's hear it. Let's hear it.
Just on one topic while we're switching gears on the elections. So in theory, we said we have the freedom to do it at any time.
True.
But I think there should be,
I think in theory it would be the last,
I agree.
you want to move it, you still want to keep it at December?
Yes, just in case something comes up or what we're trying to do, accomplish right now, we're in compliance with our manual.
Okay, so I was just curious about what we were going to do in actuality versus what we can do.
Right.
We really don't want the elections moving all over the place. Is not a
Right,
good
no, I
idea.
just want to
Okay.
say, like in June, hey, let's do elections today. Sorry.
Wait, looks like you have something to say over there.
Now, if you have just 2 meetings a year, it's quite possible it's going to be January and June. And so you don't even know when the last meeting will occur, if there's a last meeting. Because there may be another 2 meetings, and so you've already had elections in the middle of the year.
Right, we'd probably balance that out as far as if we did have 2 meetings, it would probably be, in that March, which is starting to gear up for legislation. And if we did something, it would probably be somewhere in end of October with a teleconference meeting in the middle. Informative.
I just wanted to suggest doing the elections and the meeting previous to the last meeting, just because we have to get signatures of the new president
I agree.
and submit SIRS. It takes 3 months to get the new signature on those. So if we wait till December,
Oh, that's right.
they won't
yeah.
go out until March with the new presidents.
Right, that was my thought, that the election would be at this meeting
Yeah.
if we stay on the current cycle.
Okay, yeah, let's just keep it to we'll just keep it to the fall meeting, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, the manual can or
We can
doesn't
adjust
have
to
to
it, yeah.
say what
That
meeting
would-
the elections are held at.
Right.
That was my understanding,
Currently,
to
it
get the benefit
does
of doing
say
this.
what meeting the elections are to be held at, but it does not have to. And
Thank
so
you.
we're just kind of giving you a little bit more, a little more freedom as to scheduling for those elections.
All right, and Brian, what else is in this manual?
Okay, it's going to be committee delegations.
Which page?
I am. Okay.
Page 15, page 13, and page 15. So page 13 just basically says it's for 1 year. Oh, wait, no, sorry. Ignore me. Just page 15, rather.
Okay.
It's highlighted where it says, with the exception of the Executive Management Committee, which may exercise the authority of the board, delegate it to it by the body. That's the only one that is not advisory, according to your manual, and I was not able to find any legal authority for that. So I would like to have that, to remove that sentence from the manual because it's not supported.
So why do you think it's in there to begin with?
I have no idea. I looked at your past practice act, and it's possible that Gary may have, you may have had prior counsel, and he's not with us anymore, so I can't ask him. But currently, there's no legal authority to have the executive committee be non-advisory, because that basically means that they can do whatever they want, just the two of them, and
As long as they're authorized by the board.
right. But the board can only delegate certain things, and this is not one of the things that can be delegated to a two-person committee to make decisions on behalf of the board.
So you're looking for a motion to remove that sentence.
That's my recommendation for that. But I know that the board also wanted to discuss just generally delegating certain things to the committee, and my recommendation for that would be that you can delegate whatever you want to the committees to discuss, but the final decision-making comes back to the board, and the full board makes the decision. And so that is consistent with removing that sentence, or that part of the sentence.
This
anyway.
could have been put in because of when John
It
John was president, right?
You have a great memory.
Right. That's why I think it was put in, because
yeah, June of 2016
was a
this
horrible
manual
year.
came before you,
Yeah.
and right at that moment, I think there was a 2 or 3 week period where we needed executive.
Yeah, I think it was an unusual circumstance.
And I just want to add, we called a special meeting. We did not do that.
Yeah, right.
We called a special
Right, right,
meeting
right.
weeks after the June meeting in the same month.
Yeah.
All right. So I move that we remove that part of the sentence from.
Neil, do you remember that too?
Well, I'd also make a point because at the last sunset meeting, we incorporated a secretary position. So you had 3 members for your executive committee.
Yeah, we changed the law. That was a statutory change.
Yeah.
4 is a quorum for this board. So if you had, it's still not permissible.
I just want to say another experience I've had. I think, like, for instance, if you wanted to delegate to, and I'm sure there'll be more to say about this, but licensing committee, these are our outlines for those residencies, and if they comply with this policy, then the committee is allowed, if there's a time issue or something, you can delegate certain things to your committees within, as long as there's parameters and it's not making a policy change. I don't know where they draw the line, but I know committees are allowed to do things on your
But it's
behalf.
ministerial, and those are basically non-decision making things. So ministerial is filing something or making a non-substantive change, something that's not.
Yeah, if you guide them,
yeah.
they can do, and work while you're not meeting. They're not helpless, but they can't make deliberative decisions on policy.
Okay, so do we have a motion to strike this?
So moved.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay.
Okay, so
Any more discussion on this? Okay.
Dr. Manzi,
Aye.
Miss Elliott,
Aye.
Miss Cadenas,
Aye.
Dr. Mansdorf,
Aye.
Dr. McAloon,
Aye.
and Dr. Zapp.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
I think we're good.
Brian, any more things in this?
Let's see. So I'm just looking at the agenda. Did we do possible election? We did that, right?
Mhm.
Discussion of action and committee and dates and locations. Okay. Committee appointments have already been done because everybody's staying on the same committee, correct? Okay, so do we want to have a discussion about the locations of the 2020 calendar at this point? Do we want to entertain a couple of different variations of meeting times, meeting frequency of meetings, in lieu of try to save some of the budget cost? Do you want to, let's say, have 2 full board meetings a year, one Southern California, one Northern California, with teleconference meetings? Just some new varieties out there to try to save some cost savings.
So I'd like to make a suggestion that we stick to the 4 meetings a year. We have one in Northern, one in Southern. After the first, where we meet personally in the first of the year, or the first meeting of the year, the second one be a teleconference and see how it goes. And then schedule, of course, to meet in person for the third one. And if the teleconference is a success, continue to have the 4th meeting as a teleconference. And if it's not, we could always say, well, you know what, we need to meet in person.
Okay.
That would be
that's
one
a good idea.
suggestion.
I agree, especially with our fee and our budget and the sunset review coming up. I think we should keep 4 meetings on the books.
Yeah, I do like the 4 meetings on the books. I think in terms of switching from in-person to teleconference, there are cost savings there, but I would like to know exactly what they are. And let's just assume that they are significant enough.
I think we did that. We did the analysis of everybody's flights, everybody's time. I think we can say honest. I can't remember the figures, but we spent about $10,000 without the. Is it per year?
10,000 per year.
You're budgeted for 8 years.
Yeah, 8. 8,000. So if we did so you just take that number, just divide it by 4, right? If I'm doing, and then there's your savings. So
it's $10,000 a year savings for teleconferencing.
no, not savings. About
2,500.
2,500 to 3,000.
If one person ends up not being able to be at that
Yeah.
teleconference, there is no meeting.
That's true. No, you just need a 4 quorum.
You've had you've announced a public location, and if they're not there, there's no public location.
Yeah, that's what Tara told us.
It depends on how it's noticed. So basically, if it's noticed as not necessarily you can have teleconference locations that don't have board members there. It just has to indicate that on the agenda. So we can make it so that there is a quorum, and if it's a teleconference location, then a board member has to be there. But if it's an additional location for the public, then a board member doesn't have to be there.
So if one of the board members can't show up at their location,
Correct.
And there's no meeting.
Right.
I mean,
we
if
had that.
you get together and somebody doesn't show up, we can still have a meeting.
Right.
Agreed.
I don't think $2,500 is worth having the risk of not having a meeting for it's not going to save the budget. Now, if we want to, I agree we should keep it to 4 meetings if we want to try it once, but from a budget standpoint, $2,500 is not going to make or break us.
Say that's your travel expenses and things for you, your stipend. That's not all the copying and the
Can I
mail.
get you to come to a microphone, please? Thank you, sir.
Which you'd still be
You
doing.
heard what I said, right? The 2,500 estimate, which is probably a little bit more, is more for your travel. Just assume what your flights and reimbursements cost.
Right,
for
but
meetings. But we do have other costs: printing, mailing.
that would be true for teleconference too.
Yeah, that's
So,
true.
and I think if it was a matter of hotel stay for staff, we just have more meetings in Sacramento. I mean, yeah.
If you guys don't mind, I like that idea. The Sacramento, you guys come here.
We have an obligation to be
Oh,
in
we have
Southern
to?
California once during the year.
Just one.
Yeah, one.
Yeah,
One.
just one. So let's just leave it as is right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's just
and
leave
then
it the
we'll
way it
just,
is.
You know, as we navigate, we got our officers set for sunset, and thank you, Judy, for taking the helm on the sunset. We'll make sure you get 5 more years out of this.
Oh, God help us.
Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is the sunset review report.
Yeah, for the
Oh.
calendar for next year.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Well, if we're going to have a meeting in December, do you guys want to throw out some dates at this point? Do you want some time? Does anybody have an idea where we can go in Southern California? Neil, do you have anything in Orange County that's open to?
But we've met downtown Los Angeles, and the state of California is still available to us.
Oh, that was
I mean,
fun.
the city.
The City Hall thing.
Right.
That was great.
What about University of Irvine? Don't they have one?
We had met at the Orange City Council.
Kaiser's opening their new medical school down there. I could find out where that is.
That'd be great.
In LA?
Yeah.
And we now have a contact with USC's medical school, too. Bet you Dr. Armstrong could get us a room.
Okay.
That would
If
be
you guys
great.
want to
Try to get that
entertain
one.
those locations, we'll say
That's
the
an easy
first
location
meeting
to get to.
in March will be in Southern California then?
Okay. And typically, which week in March is it?
The
Just
first.
The first. So
Friday.
Friday,
March
March
6th.
6th. Okay.
So March 6th,
June 5th.
SoCal. The next meeting is what'd you say?
June 5.
June 5. Sacktown.
18th. The reason being because you've got the holiday, which falls on the 7th. So if you did it on the 4th, that's the beginning of a long holiday weekend. If you
No,
for September.
Or what happened to June?
So June
June
5th.
5th.
Okay. And that'll be in Sacramento.
Sacramento. September, Sacramento again.
Excuse me, it's the 18th? Would that be-
18th, yes.
Because the
'Cause we-
labor holiday is the 4th.
Yeah.
5th
Is the
is-
7th.
Okay.
So if you did it the 4th, it'd be the beginning of a holiday weekend. If you did it the 11th, that's already a short week.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And
That's the day before Rosh Hashanah,
which one?
the 18th.
I want to start striking those out so you don't know what the next day is.
Does that matter?
No.
And then December 11th.
Are we doing the 18th?
December 11th, Sacramento. Is everybody okay with that?
Are we ever going to go to the Merritt College?
We can. We can probably do that in September if we want to entertain that. The invitation's still there. The reason why we didn't go there this time, we were supposed to be there this time on this because of the budget locations or the budget presentations.
Okay.
So we can keep September up in the air, make those contacts. Now let's talk about committee dates, right? This is where it gets confusing because we need, what, 4 weeks?
3
3.
at most.
Your manual actually has information as to when the committee meetings are supposed to be held.
Okay,
I think
good.
it's the 3rd.
Enlighten us.
I will as soon as I find it.
What did you say back there? 3 weeks before the board meeting.
Are those suggestions or mandates? Because we've had the meetings less than that. We
Well, let's try for 3 weeks before the board meeting, and then we've been doing Wednesdays, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wednesday, 3 weeks before the
That-
board
that-
meeting as the date for the committees.
Yes.
Right.
Can we just agree on that?
Yes.
So would it be February
12?
13th?
12th.
12.
Oh, there it is, 12th.
May 13th.
May 13th, committee.
August 19th.
Here's the 26th.
November will be the tough one because it's Thanksgiving. So November 18th. 18th? Yeah.
Which one?
November 18th.
Between May and November.
August.
Wouldn't it be the 26th?
It's like a whole month.
August 19 or 26?
19th. August.
And we'll send this out to you.
Perfect.
So November 18th?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay.
Okay, so moving on, just a quick update on the sunset.
Right.
Now we're done with board meeting, getting all the annual reports, everything. We've been working on putting everything together. Now it's going to be full charge ahead to have a report in a final draft form. We're hoping within like 3 to 4 weeks. And once we get that, I'll be sending that out to you. I think legal needs the first level review, right? Do you guys do
First level review of what?
the sunset?
No, I know, but
I mean, do we send it to you after we finalize our final draft or draft?
Oh yeah, yes, I definitely need to look at it, but
Okay.
I wasn't sure when you said first level review. I'm like, is that the
Yeah,
first?
no, I mean, it was just,
Oh, okay. But yes, I do need to review
yeah.
it, and we
before-
can
once-
figure that
once-
out. Yeah.
Once we get this figured out here, then we'll send it off to you guys. And then if I don't hear back from the committees on, extending the deadline, we'll have to figure out what we can do. Maybe that would be a time to do a teleconference meeting to
Regarding sunset.
disregarding the sunset. So as soon as I hear back from them, I'll let you guys know that I don't think there would be an issue, but you never know. You never know. Deadlines are deadlines to them over there. So I think that's about it. We'll keep you guys up to breast on everything that is going on with the sunset as we get through it. So I'll give you your updates about where our status is. And I think that's it for me.
Okay. So are there any, thank you. Are there any future items we want to put on for our December meeting? Anything going on in the committees that you want to talk about or, okay.
I just want to mention one thing. I would like to give my congratulations to Maria Cadenas.
Oh, that's for sure.
That she is a candidate for California Senate, District 17. Best of luck to you.
I'm going to be your campaign manager. We're going to win. All the way to we're not stopping until we get to the White House. Right? I need another career. No, it's very exciting.
Bill Monty. It's termed out.
So,
Was that John Laird's position?
open seat.
John Laird had that position.
Yes.
Go ahead. Well, no, I was going to say,
I think
That's-
we're okay.
Yeah. I was just going to say,
Yeah,
Oh,
The whole report.
the whole report, the executive report.
I make a motion to approve the executive report.
Okay.
All in favor?
Here we go. Dr. Manzi?
Aye.
Miss Elliott?
Aye.
Miss Cadenas?
Aye.
Dr. Mansdorf?
Aye.
Dr. McAloon?
Aye.
Dr. Zapp?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay. Now, for future items on the next board meeting, I'm going to add, I'd like to just have a residency review and fellowship update.
okay.
Is that broad enough? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And I believe during our executive meeting, we talked about trying to maybe establish a larger, diabetes kind of discussion with the medical board and kind of looking into that.
Right.
If we were to have the Southern California meeting with Dr. Armstrong at USC, he is one of the renowned experts in diabetes presentation.
Be wonderful.
Yeah, and the impact that it has on our members in the state of California.
And if we need options on that, we've been invited to the UCSF's limb salvage clinic to schedule at any time to visit there as well. So if we need options in that realm, we can arrange that if the other is not doable.
Great. Okay, and I guess if there's nothing else, I'm going to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay.
Mansdorf. Okay. Motion to adjourn. Dr. Manzi?
Aye.
Miss Elliott?
I want to use it so bad.
Aye.
Miss Cadenas?
Aye.
Dr. Mansdorf?
Aye.
Dr. McAloon?
Aye.
Dr. Zapp?
Okay, great. Meeting adjourned.